County Planning Commission will begin with a few introductory remarks. The meeting is being streamed live, and when adjourned and posted, it'll be available at any time at lincolncountysd.gov. The order of events tonight will be as follows. For each public hearing, staff will introduce the agenda item and present a summary of the staff findings. The applicant will then be asked to explain the proposal in further detail and to answer any questions from the County Planning Commission. I will then open the floor to public comment, first for persons in support of the application and for persons in opposition of the application. When you, we will, hold on, just hang with us, Commissioner Schmidt. When you step up to the podium, please state your name, address, and speak clearly into the microphone. Please limit your comments to less than 5 minutes. Lastly, decisions on changes of zones will be scheduled for an additional public hearing during an upcoming Board of Commissioners meeting. The decisions on conditional use permit applications may be appealed to the County Board of Commissioners by submitting a letter to the County Planning and Zoning Office within 5 business days. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll first do roll call of just the Planning Commission members. So Commissioner Green? Here. Commissioner Sweeter?
Here.
Commissioner Otten?
Here.
Commissioner Jungling? Here. Commissioner Scott is also here. Next, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the meeting agenda with one change, that we take item number 1 from new business, the annual work session with the Board of Commissioners, and we move that up before we take public input on non-agenda items. Can I get a motion and a second for that?
So moved, Green.
Second, Jungling.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? All right, motion passes. So we'll move to that now, the annual work session of the Board of Commissioners, led by Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Toby Brown, representing County Planning. I appreciate everyone's attendance tonight. This is an important, we do this on an annual basis. We have a joint work session between the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Commission. It's a good chance for staff to kind of recap last year's activities, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for the boards to engage staff and for the boards to engage each other to kind of talk about some of the issues or potential issues that we have in the county. So a little bit is, did put a PowerPoint together to talk a little bit about 2024 as far as what we experienced as far as development and growth, and then also kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that we want to work on going into 2025.
Hey, Toby, I know we did the planning commissioners. I believe we also have people online, just for everyone's knowledge, right? I know Jim's here. Do we have anyone online also? Since we're now in the joint deal?
Yeah. Commissioner Aaron's is online,
All
yes.
right. I just wanted the public to know for the record that we did have somebody online. So, thanks, Toby. Sorry.
Nope, good point. So a little bit about the presentation tonight is we'll talk a little bit about what the Planning and Zoning Department is, and then we'll talk a little bit about the activities of 2024, and then we'll look at the expectations of 2025. So a little bit about the Planning and Zoning Department. So I'll start out by saying, what is the Planning and Zoning Department? Well, we're 4 people. Me, of course, I'm the director. And then we have Noah Watson, who's our planner. And we have Joe Carlson, who's our building inspector / code enforcement officer. We have Keith Holter, who is our building inspector / code enforcement officer. And both of those are split up. So Noah really handles kind of the day-to-day planning activities. So if you're an applicant, you probably talk to Noah quite a bit throughout it. But I also like to say is we're not a bureaucracy up there. You're always about one person away from talking to who you really need to talk to up in the department. But with that is that we're lean, but I think we're streamlined. We make development go as quickly as it can with those aspects. So first and foremost, what is it that we really do? So we do the land use planning, future land use planning. So you're aware of that. We just got done the last 2 years. The county worked on adopting a new comprehensive plan, which is really the long-range planning document that influences all the decisions that we make going forward, not only for the county, but also for the private citizens who are purchasing land or wanting to utilize their land for development purposes. But more importantly, what our office does is we do code administration. And under that falls the zoning, subdivision, building, and nuisance codes. So those have all been adopted by the County Board of Commissioners, and staff is charged with implementing, administering, and enforcing those regulations. All of those regulations have been codified. They're on the county website. So all the current laws and regulations we have are within that. And what I always like to say is interesting, if you go look through the codified ordinances of the county, the majority of things are land use. There really isn't any separate laws that the county board has passed other than really land use regulations. So again, the zoning ordinance, that's our 2009 revised zoning ordinance. That covers the unincorporated areas of the county, so anything that's not within a city, that ordinance covers. We also have the joint zoning ordinance with the city of Sioux Falls. That ordinance covers everything within the extraterritorial area, the growth area of the city of Sioux Falls, or the joint planning area. The subdivision ordinance, that governs land subdividing or development of land. So those regulations are one in hand with really what we're doing with development and what the requirements for that are. Our building code, that's an international code that the county's adopted that governs for building, permitting, and building and construction. Our nuisance ordinance, the planning and zoning department is the chief nuisance officer for the county. So we do have a separate ordinance that governs those different types of things. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but one thing that I always like to tell, anytime I can tell it, is that Lincoln County is not policing nuisance ordinances. We're on a complaint basis. So in order for us as staff to pursue some type of a violation, we have to wait until there's a public complaint. We do have that form available on our website, and that's how we go through that part of it. And you say, well, how come we don't police? Well, one, as I explained to you at the beginning, is we don't have the staffing really to do that type of an activity. But more importantly, I think that the county and the department is really geared towards responsiveness to those issues that we have. So if we're out there policing, we're not going to get through the process that we need to get through, but we're looking more to what those public complaints are. And I would say too is that as the department is charged with nuisance enforcement, we have the powers of law enforcement. So we do have the ability to bring charges through the state's attorney's office for violations of our ordinances. We have done that, and we will continue to do that if there is violations. So a little bit about last year. Last year we did have a 1% increase, and this we're showing going back the 5 years just to kind of give you some kind of perspective to what the county's looking at. So as you can see, we're pretty consistent over the years. But what we did see is about a 1% increase in residential permits for 2023. And residential permits is new starts, but also just remodeling and those different types of things. We did, however, see a 21% decrease in non-residential permits from 2023. And I'll say really what I see or my interpretation of that is what I think you probably know too is we just don't have the land, build-ready sites for that type of development. We're running out of the spots that we can facilitate that type of development, and that's our commercial and industrial activities. So that is something we need to look at in the future. So the value construction, if you remember last year, I said last year was the best year we ever had. Well, now that's number two, or 2 years ago was the best year we ever had, but last year was the best year we ever had as far as terms of value of construction. So again, we crossed over that $100 million threshold, which I know that's not a $1 billion number like some of our neighbors, but really when you look at this is the unincorporated area of the county. This is the area that lacks a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the ability to develop. So what we're seeing there is a lot of good, strong development that essentially impacts all tax bases in the county with that type of development. So it's good. And again, what I've always said too is that this isn't, we've helped facilitate this as a department, but this is really private landowners that are investing in our county, that continue to invest in our county, that see it as a great place to start businesses, to build homes, to maintain those different types of uses. As far as development permit fees, these are the fees that, again, like building permit structures that we charge for. And so I'll talk a little bit about that too, is that there's a little bit of differentiation to talk about. But as you can see, we're pretty consistent. The non-residential, you can see we did have some big jumps last year and this year. And I'll say we've lumped in agriculture. Both of those were agriculture-related projects that were the ones that pushed us up to that point with the non-residential side of it. On the non-residential side, which is our commercial and industrial, the county does have a cap of $5 million. So if you hit the $5 million cap, then we don't go above that as far as permitting fees. The residential, we base that on a square footage cost. We don't base that on actual cost. And so our square footage cost is $80. And so for most of our contractors, they'll say, well, we're building right now for double probably what that is right now. So we are missing a capture on that part of it. But again, that's a challenge to talk about fees and about changing some of those structures with it. But as you can see, our non-residential development permit fees are a majority of what we do for building permit fees. As far as application fees, and I'll start out by saying is that in 2009, when we adopted the current zoning ordinance, was really the last time that we changed the application fees. And so one of the things that, I talked to the auditor about and the budget committee is that it'd be nice if the county board adopted every year a permit or a fee schedule, not just for the planning and zoning, but for the other departments that do fees, because we are missing on those every year, cost increase and sort of the resources that we have. So it's always good to kind of just gradually increase as opposed to we wake up tomorrow and we jump something that we haven't touched since 2009. That kind of gets people's attention and it kind of causes a little bit of friction. But as you can see, a lot of the majority of the permits that we do or applications that we do are plats. And so really that's kind of a gauge though that I use moving forward is because typically the first step in any development is that you plat, subdivide the property for lots. And then what we see is in the next subsequent years is when that development takes place. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So as far as specific applications, in 2024 we had 33 conditional use permits, which is pretty consistent with what we typically have. 28 of those were approved, 6 of those were within the Sioux Falls joint jurisdictional area. And again, the majority of conditional use permits that we have in Lincoln County are non-standard. So the Planning Commission is really charged with staff as developing conditions that are going to properly regulate those different types of uses. But that's something I'll talk a little bit more about a little later on too. As far as rezone applications, we did have a drop in rezone applications, and I'll explain that a little bit. But we did have 5 petitions or applications that were submitted. One of those was approved. That happened to be in the joint jurisdictional area. 4 of them were denied. So the majority that were in the joint jurisdictional area, those were denied, or in the unincorporated area, those were denied. The one that was in the joint area was approved. So we're going to say what's kind of the trend of the drop-off, and I'll say, well, the trend is that we were telling everybody that came in the office we're going to adopt a new comprehensive plan. And so that held off a number of applicants. And so there's a lot in the hopper right now. So in the next coming months, you're going to see quite a few applications coming forward, even more so than I would say 5 or 10 from last year. We've got quite a few that are working in there. And a lot of it is those areas that are within that planned growth area. And those will be good projects because we're working with the cities and we're working with, the county departments to make sure that those developments are going to be good fits and good growth for the county. So a little bit about, and I should say, I can answer any questions at the end too, or you can feel free to interrupt me. But some of the expectations as a department that we have for 2025. So as you know, on December 24th of last year, the county board adopted the current comprehensive plan, the 2050, connecting Lincoln County. And really, many people have asked about this, but really our visioning and our policy making and our goal setting, that's done. That's put to bed on December 24th. Really, the next step is about implementation. What are we going to do with that document? And the one thing that I would really say is that we're all familiar with studies and different types of options and things like that. That's not what you adopted on December 24th. What you adopted on December 24th is the plan for the county. And really, there isn't options in there. It's either we follow it or we don't follow it. And really, one of the things that we heard, and I've said this before, is that proud of that comprehensive plan because it was citizen driven. That came from our citizens about the comments that they made, that they had. And I think of a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now, if we would have had that comp plan today, a lot of the issues that we're dealing with now would have been handled differently. But we can't go back, we can't do those things. But we need to go forward. And really, the comprehensive plan is a document that we can that we don't have the luxury of saying we're not going to do anything with this. This isn't a document that you can put on a shelf. This is a document that every day someone calls our office or every day someone looks it up to say, this is what the vision is for the property that I own, the property that I want to buy, or my neighbor's property. And so it's important that, again, is that it's a challenge because what before you is one individual that maybe has a good plan, that has a good dream, but that good plan or that good dream could impact the rest of the county. It could impact the rest of the citizens that we have. And so again, the county comprehensive plan is that document that we're really supposed to utilize to make sure that this plan that we want to have moving forward is put into place. And I'll say a lot of it is more than just the future land use map, which everybody focuses on, which is the vision or the visual vision of what we want to see the county. But what's more important is the words that were in that document. And a lot of the words that we heard from our citizens were pretty bold and were pretty direct when it was saying, hey, we're tired of waking up one day and something pops up next to us and we don't know why it's there. That means you follow a good plan. The other thing was them telling county staff, it's like, be leaders in this area, because we're not getting good cooperation with the municipalities. We're not working together as a team to make sure that we're all on the same page with growth and development. That's all things that we need that don't get solved overnight, that we have to continue to work forward with. But then more importantly, I think all the issues that we were dealing with at that time as an historical reference, 2045, 2050, when whoever's in place gets to that position, they're going to look back and they're going to say, look at the issues that the county addressed with this plan, which is all the things that we're here tonight to talk about, later to talk about tonight, but then also all the things that are going to be coming down the road too. So again, I implore you is that our visioning, our goal setting, our discussion about what we want the county to be is done. It's really time now to implement what that is and to work towards making sure we're implementing that. The second thing is, and Commissioner Aaron's pointed this out at the adoption, is that the first step that we really need to do after the comprehensive plan is done is to work through and update or review and update the zoning code. So that's really your implementation tool that makes all of this a reality as far as our land use visioning. And so what is our goals and policies? How does that impact what our laws are? So what our zoning is, that's your laws. That's what we require everyone to follow who's a landowner in the county. And we know we have some challenges there, some things that we uncovered with the comprehensive plan. But what's important is we look through that zoning code, and I'll talk a little bit about how that's going to look, is it's not going to look like a one whole document coming forward. It's going to be a piecemeal effort. It'll be chapters at a time that staff will bring forward. It'll be different sections that we'll bring forward and we'll talk about. But we're not going to adopt a whole new zoning ordinance, because for 2 points to that is, one is that whatever we would do, if we revised and adopted a whole new zoning code, that would non-conforming use everything that was up to that point. We don't want that to happen. So it's going to be a piecemeal effort, but a comprehensive piecemeal effort, and a piecemeal effort that's going to take a lot of attention to detail with the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners. Your staff's going to do the heavy lift, but we're not policymakers. That's what the Board of Commissioners, and that's what they're looking for the Planning Commission to give recommendations to. So it's important that, that you put that hat on as a policymaker to say, this is a direction that we want to go with the different things that we have for us. In saying that, staff's going to give you some recommendations, and we've got a laundry list of things that, under the current ordinance, that are just need some improvement and need some, action on. So we'll start the process of bringing the draft forward. The third thing is so pending approval of South Dakota Legislature, they're not going to approve it. They punted it till next year because they were going to do something this year as far as study it, but they didn't get that done. And so a little bit of background on that is that under South Dakota statute or South Dakota law is that a municipality or a county can adopt a building code as long as it's, at this time, the 2018 International Building Code. And so what's pending would be an update to the 2024. So the International Code Council, who adopts the building code, they update that code every 3 years. And so the last time that was done was in 2024, and so nobody can adopt it in South Dakota until the legislature allows it through the statute. You're going to say, well, how come that? And I'm not going to get into the whole issue with it, but the difference between 2018 and 2024 was, to some in the building community, a drastic change. It's going to cause some increased costs for building construction and those different types of things. And a lot of that is addressing some of the concerns, I think, as far as different events and things like that. Like you've heard me mention this before, but we are parts of Lincoln County or in Tornado Alley. So some of those little spots in the county do have to do some additional construction techniques and those different types of things. But with that, I think as staff is that we're going to recommend that so currently we're under the 2021 was the one that is the current one that South Dakota legislature says we can adopt. I would recommend that we're going to bump it to the 2021. You're going to say, well, why would we do that? Because in the county, we typically off-yeared it, so we would wait in between and let it go. But I think there's some things that we need to get updated that would help some of our building community with that. As far as getting us up to date with the rest of the area, as far as the other municipalities in our area and county in our area. I think it would also allow us to take a look at adopting the international code for property maintenance. So I mentioned at the beginning that we do have a separate ordinance for nuisance code enforcement. For some of it, it's lacking. It doesn't give us a direction with many different things. Adopting the property maintenance code would be a better solution for us to handle different types of nuisances that we have consistent with it. But more importantly, as staff, is it would give us an appeal process. So if staff was working with a landowner and we had an issue with compliance, they could appeal our decision as opposed to us going to court or doing some of those different types of things. It would just give us more of a local appeal process, but it would also give us more distinct issues of what it is. And I think the challenge that a lot of colleagues always ask me, well, what's it like in Lincoln County being one of the fastest growing, and I always answer it in the way that we're urbanizing quicker than we are not. And so you're going to say, well, what's the challenge there? Well, not the entire county is urbanizing, but in a majority of the northern part of the county we're urbanizing. And with that becomes unique challenges that we don't really have a lot of the tools in place currently to address those different types of things. And so it'd be good if we started thinking about, and we did that with the comp plan, is looking to that north area to be more of an urban planned area or growth area. It'd be good that we start looking at all of our policies to make sure that we do have the tools in place to address our urbanization in the north end. And so with that, the other next part about that is develop urban development standards and incorporate those through engineering review. So a lot of the development that we do is rural type development, ditches, septic systems, and those different types of things, and what I'll call just kind of a non-urban type development. The challenge that we have there, and the Planning Commission is completely aware of this. If you remember, we did have staff from the city of Sioux Falls come down and they talked about old shoe, new shoe, and those different types of things. And really what we got out of that is that it's a challenge when our cities are growing as fast as they are to assimilate some of the existing developments that we have in the county. And a lot of those costs, or future costs, are borne by the landowners that are within those developments. And it's becoming very costly. And that what we heard from the city of Sioux Falls staff is that they're anticipating that they just won't annex those developments, that they'll just build around it, they'll grow around it. And that became concerning, I believe, and I won't speak for the Planning Commission, but I know it became concerning for the Planning Commission because it's going to cost the county then, essentially. And I'll just be blunt with it, it's going to cost the county. And that's something that it's going to impact us down the road, and something that we need to maybe start proactively addressing. Next thing we want to do is review and update the applicable applications and forms. With the new comp plan, we want to take a look at all of our applications, and what we heard a lot from the public is just keep it simple, stupid. There's a lot of things that we have in policy and words and everything else, and that they just really, can we just make this streamline a part of it? And one of the things that I'm continually proud of is that there isn't too many times when we have an applicant come down here when it's not the applicant. And I think that's a good thing. When we get to the point where we just have attorneys and we have engineers and those different types of things, that becomes more confusing for the boards and for staff and everybody else. It's good now, and whoever we're dealing with is usually the applicant, the landowner, and that different type of thing. Board development policies. So one of the things that we've always talked about is what the Planning Commission deals with on a monthly basis. Is very land use oriented. A lot of issues, a lot of challenges that we have. It'd be good if we dedicated some time and effort to making sure that there is some board development, education, training, and those different types of things. And then with that would be policies and things that we can assimilate to that. And then review and potentially update fee schedule. So nobody wants to talk about that, but we need to take a look at, are our fees applicable to what it is that we're doing? and what we need to do, and are they covering the costs essentially of what it is that we need to cover with that part of it. And so we're already taking a look at that as far as staff with some of those directions and things like that. But with that, I kind of sped through that a little bit, but if there's any questions that you have for staff at this time about any of the, kind of the past year's activities, or if you want to talk a little bit about kind of that, some things we're looking forward to in 2025, so.
Can you scroll back a screen,
Yep.
Toby? I guess I'll start, just one question that, that I have, and you talked about, how we'll maybe start going through some of the ordinances and some of the things bit by bit. Can you give us kind of some bullet points where you want to start? Where you think that the comprehensive plan identified things that are different than, what we have on the books now?
We'll start with the easy stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm asking, yeah.
Well, I think we'll break it up into 3 parts. So we'll start at the back, which is really kind of the fees part. We'll take a look at that, and then we'll just take a look at really kind of the process part of it, to make sure that, one of the things that we've talked about over the years is that we have criteria for conditional use permits. We have 3 criteria that the board and staff is supposed to consider when they're either recommending approval or denial of a conditional use permit. And I think last week is a prime example of that with the joint meeting, is that staff did recommend denial of a conditional use permit. And I know there's always a lot of discussion, well, can you deny a conditional use permit or can you not deny a conditional use permit? Well, we did, and we based on that criteria. But that criteria is pretty vague and pretty subjective, objective. So it'd be good that if we kind of narrow down to what we really want that criteria to be, as far as, is it traffic, is it parking, is it signage, is it, impact to the neighborhood and those different types of things, a little bit more direct with it. So I think we'd start kind of that end point, and then I think we go to the front point, and then we go to the middle point, which is really the zoning districts and that part of it. It's not going to get done this year. I mean, it's just going to take us time to get into the meat and potatoes of it. And of course, throughout this process is that there's public input and there's concerns that the public has and things that they would like to see changed. But one of the things, I'll talk a little bit about the zoning ordinance part of it, or the zoning districts. And that's one of the things that, I've talked to you about a little bit is that we do have the majority of land uses, we have permissive, permitted special, and conditional uses. The majority of land uses we have in every zoning district, and that's your A1, your rural residential, and your commercial and your industrial, is conditional uses. But those conditional uses are non-standard conditional uses, meaning that there isn't any prerequisites that a landowner has to submit with their application that they're going to abide by, or conditions. Those are all conditions that staff places on it. We discuss it with the applicant. The boards ultimately either say yes or no to it, or they can add additional ones, or they can modify them. That process works good, but it also creates a lot of inconsistencies, and we know that because, our favorite thing is storage units and oversized garages. Well, sometimes, based on the neighborhood configuration, some of those conditions are a little bit different from one to one. And that's challenging as staff, because our number one goal is to just be consistent. We want to treat everybody the same. We want to treat every project the same. And so those things need to be addressed and looked at. And then the other thing that we've talked about a little bit is, and I'll talk a little bit about it, is castrated animal feeding operations, which is probably our most intensive use in the A1 agricultural district. I say possibly or probably, but there's other things that are not. But they have, and I was just looking back today, and again, our first zoning ordinance in the county was 1971, 1995, and then the 1995 one, we amended multiple times. I mean, you can't keep track how many times that was amended. But the majority of amendments were for concentrated animal feeding operations, the setbacks and the regulations and all those different types of things. And I always like to say too is that concentrated animal feeding operations, there was really no regulation statewide until the EPA told the state that you got to come up with some type of permitting process for concentrated animal feeding operations. Well, then the counties jumped on board too. And really the state said, well, look, we're only looking at the environmental impacts here. We're not looking at the nuisance impacts and those different types of things. And that's where every county has something different, But with that, I mean, we have a checklist, and we're actually working on an application right now. We haven't had a true CAFO in about 4 years, at least swine CAFO. But we're working on an application right now, and I mean, it's a laundry list. I mean, there's 18 things that the applicant's got to submit with the application. And the board's well aware is that they can meet all the check the blanks, but more than likely, it's going to get appealed to the Board of Commissioners. But we need to come up with some type of a system where if you meet all the steps and all the rules, do you make those just permitted special uses? And that's what they are. And with that, but, you know, that's understanding that that's a lot easier said than done. So there's going to be a lot of discussion there, but, so that's kind
I
of,
think that is something that we'll have discussion on.
yep, yeah. Yeah. Because I think, you know, I mean, again, CAFOs are our most intensive land use. It is a little concerning that we haven't had any applications in a number of years, though. And that's, you know, some people might say that's good, but it does, last year, one of those things was a $70 million agricultural operation. So they're significant projects and have a great impact on not just the southern part of the county, but including the individuals live in Sioux Falls. That impacts everybody's taxes with those types of developments, so.
Well, not to mention what they just do for the local economy, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Interesting. Anybody else? Questions for Toby? Or for Mr. Brown?
Toby? We're hearing a lot from, much more active in townships these days. So how does our comp plan accommodate better communication or take into consideration impacts on townships as well as, you know, as we look at from the county perspective? Well, how do we accommodate that? I mean, we got a plan for that. I know there's a bill out there that is being talked about right now, but just from our own comprehensive plan, have we adjusted or do we have a vehicle or a means in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's a great question. I think, you know, early on that staff learned that communication's essential. And so I think we're one of the only counties in the state that anytime we have an application within a township, we notify every single, every official with the township. At first, we just started with the chair, but sometimes we realized the chair didn't communicate with the rest of the board, so we've started, and, you know, and I'll say that though, in the joint area, we don't do that. So that's where you'll notice a lot of the joint meetings, though, the township people will come say, we didn't know anything about this, you know, and stuff like that, and that's true. Because we don't do any mail notification in the joint jurisdictional area. But I think with to answer your question, with the new comprehensive plan, I think it really implored staff that we're gonna work with the townships. And part of that is I just think meet. And so we've already started doing some of that now, is that anytime we have a project, instead of ping-ponging people, you heard me say that a lot of, you know, you gotta go talk to the township, and that is, now we set up the meeting, we invite the township and the applicant to come to our office, and we sit down and we talk about the potential issues that might exist. Because again, we're not the township. Township has their own rules, regulations, and what'll come really surprising is each township kind of does it different. So it's, and Little Lincoln County, everybody kind of does it a little bit differently, but I think we're working on that, and the highway department does a great job of, you know, Terry takes the lead with the townships too, help them with permitting and really kind of showing them the ropes of how the county does it and things like that. So I think, you know, bottom line is we're not going to achieve anything unless we all work together and we're all on sync with what we're doing. And so I think that's in the new comp plan put together. But I'll say to further answer that question is that leadership comes with those people who reach out. It doesn't come with those people who wait for it to be reached to them. And I think that was the challenge that we had previous with the comprehensive plan, is that the county was just kind of, you know, we engaged when we thought we needed to engage. But this new push by the public is that we engage. So we take the lead in it, and everything's going to go through our office too, so.
One thing to add to that, Commissioner Schmidt, that has been added now for probably a couple of years, Toby, maybe 3, is that there's an added condition to all the conditional use permits that they have to meet. They have to, there has to be approval from the road authority.
Yeah.
And so that really gives the township some teeth when it's something that's on one of their roads and right-of-ways that they're in charge of. And I know that's been extremely helpful.
Yep. And the townships, I mean, you know, with a lot of our growth and development is off of township roads. Without them, we're not growing. So it's important that we all work together, so.
Very good. Commissioner Jungling?
So Toby, I think it's amazing how we're the fastest growing counties in the United States and definitely in South Dakota, and we're doing it with a staff of 4.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for everything you're doing, and this comp plan is just over the top is what we need, it's great. I really think it gets the springboard, the platform for going forward. We've been talking on this planning commission for years about the effects, what we do when we rezone something or make conditional use or whatever. It's just for, the short-term thing is we could do it for, hey, this is what they want to do for the next 6 months, for the next year. We really got to see what's going to happen for the next 30, 40 years for the community, for the county. And we've seen it now where Sioux Falls, other communities are now engulfing these little developments. And these developments now are going to have to pay many, many thousands of dollars to either incorporate or they just get growing around and nothing ever happens. Again, like you said, it counts now on our emergency management, our rural water systems, our road districts, all that sort of stuff now have these islands all over the place. So I really want to encourage everyone when we make decisions moving forward that we follow the comp plan and we consider all these things that Toby brought up. And then, these fees and all this sort of stuff, I think we really do need to start policing more stuff in our county. I drive by all the time, and I know we all do. We see cars sitting outside that aren't conforming, or people living in their storage units, or whatever they want to call them, all that sort of stuff. But overall, just thank you, Toby, for everything you do, and you and the staff, Noah, everyone, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we're a good team, I mean, and I'd speak for our team is that we would say thank you. I think we get to live a dream every day to work in a county that has good growth and good development, and the passion that the staff has for what we're doing. They know, and I wouldn't say that's not true in big departments either, but they know every day that what they do is critically important to what we're doing, not only for today but for the future, because a lot of this isn't just politics and all that. This is life safety things. I mean, what I'm more proud of every day is that we don't have something that burns down or blows down and that somebody gets hurt, right? That's what we're really concerned with. And then the other part about the land use part of it too is that we know that this county has limited resources. Every day we know that. And with limited resources, we have to do this correct. We have to do it right, because if we don't do it right, we don't have the ability to fix it, right? And so it's important that every day that we're working towards that plan. And I know it's hard, because I know everybody will say, I think I've told everybody no in this county at least once or twice. And it doesn't get easier. It doesn't get easier every day. But what we like to tell people is that it's never a hard no. There's always a way to find a way to do it. It may not be what your dream is. So I always tell people, don't come into our office with a dream, because we're dream killers, we're dream crushers, But we're going to make sure that what the development you're proposing to do and what your neighbor's proposing to do is going to be consistent with what's going to make the future better in the county. That's all that matters, what we do, so.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I want to piggyback on what Commissioner Jungling has said. I don't know that we appreciate how our planning and zoning board works, our board that we're appointed, and our planning and zoning staff. You should go sometime and try to deal with a city like Sioux Falls, and when they give you a no, it's a hard no, period. Forget it, go back, it's over. On the other hand, we have many incidents where we've turned down, Planning and Zoning Board has turned down, or the Board of Commissioners has turned down. And we've later talked with our director, who works very hard to find a way to get that done, but to get it done inside the comp plan itself, so you're not violating that. And I think you got to appreciate that. That's something that doesn't happen very often in too many counties. And the other thing that I've talked to Toby about how many times, he's the only department head that when you call planning and zoning, he answers. A department head answers. You figure that one out. Now, I've encouraged him to look at his staff. I've encouraged him that he may need more people. And he's the most conservative, bullheaded guy that I know. He just keeps putzing along with the same crew, and they get the job done. So, we got to give a credit where credit is due, so my hats are off to this man and how well he handles this growth that this county has appreciated and what's ahead. So, anyway, that's my sermonette on your behalf, Toby. I thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. Anybody else? Anybody else have anything for Mr. Brown? No? Just want to tell you thanks, Toby. This is good, and thanks for putting this together. I wish we could have had a full staff. I think we could have had a little more dialogue, but I understand people have things going on, so, but I appreciate you putting all this together. I look forward to seeing how it unfolds going forward, so.
Yeah, I mean, again, it isn't just me. I mean, I'm nothing without the staff that we have. So I think they're critical to what we're doing. But beyond that is, I'll say this again, and I'll say it 100 times this year, is that these boards are going to have to do a lot of work with the zoning ordinance. Because what's going to be before you is you're going to hear from all sides and all different angles. And it's a policy that you're setting. It's a law that you're setting. It's important that, the other thing I would say too is these are regulations. They're meant to be regulations. We don't zone anything out in the county. We regulate it. So we're going to have to make sure that you balance all of those issues and all those other things. And I'll say this to you now, and I'll say it to you ever. I don't care ever how you vote. I just want to make sure that when you vote, you're voting the way that you want to vote, but you understand all the facts and everything before you, because that's what's critical to what it is that you do. And then a lot of this stuff is really complicated. Like I always tell staff is that, we're a master of everything, but a master of none, because we're dealing with, one day we're learning about pipelines, the next day we're learning about solar, we're learning about all these different things that are, we're touching on, and we're trying to figure out how should these be regulated, but more importantly, how does the public want these things regulated? And that's difficult, that's a challenge. But it's a good challenge because that means we're a growing county and that we care about what it is. Because when we stop caring about the value of the land, we're going to stop caring about the value of the land. So it's important that we don't lose that. So
I would disagree, though. We are masters on big sheds. We get them monthly, and we're getting pretty close on storage units, too.
I'm definitely an expert at storage units, not much else, but I can. Yeah, we build more storage units in Lincoln County than anywhere in the
Anywhere
state.
else.
So
I know.
yeah.
It's crazy, the amount of stuff our resident people must have,
Yeah.
All right, well, very good.
Oh, thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. At this time, I'm gonna just, I'm gonna see if we can get a motion for a brief recess.
Is there any other
What's that?
discussion?
Or,
We're still doing the joint?
Yeah, you guys can have further discussion if you want to talk about other
okay.
issues and stuff, and then otherwise, we will convene the regular meeting at 6:30.
sure. All right. Does anybody have anything other than, to visit about other than Mr. Brown's presentation?
Well, I know Commissioner Joel's on the line and Jim and Betty are here. Is there anything as far as Board of Commissioners you'd like to ask or discuss, or what you see for 2025 coming forward?
Well, to reiterate one thing, you execute our planning and zoning ordinance. You're the safeguard. You're the public, you're appointed. You guys have an awesome job of doing that. And that's where it starts right here with you. And all the research and all the time that you spend on that. And the commission then may have final approval, but believe me, we don't spend and dig deep as you guys do. So we owe you a debt of gratitude and a thank you.
Very good, Commissioners. And I'd like to also thank the rest of the board too. I know we have our own conversations, before and after and all that stuff. And the amount of time that everyone does their researching and calling other people, calling constituents, calling just the amount of times after work, in the mornings, at night, just trying to learn about everything we can is, really takes a lot of time, so the rest of the board, thank you everyone for really going the extra 5 miles to try to do what we think is best for the county.
Yep. Very
I
good.
think your comprehensive plan is fantastic. Your comprehensive plan is gonna take a huge punch this Thursday up here with the prison getting stuffed out there. So they're gonna try stuffing that at you Thursday. Your comprehensive plan is gonna take a big punch. Your support here Thursday. They're gonna try placing that, it's gonna screw your comprehensive plan. Thursday, we need your help.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? No? Okay, very good. Commissioner Aaron's, are you with us up there?
I'm with you.
Oh, you got any comments?
Not at this time. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, very good. Can we get a motion to just have a brief recess and we'll excuse that way the county commissioners can have a second to leave. And then I don't think we'll have to wait till 6:30, do we? We do? But yes? Oh, okay, I guess we'll wait till 6:30.
Good time.
Yeah. So can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion to,
Can I get a
take a brief
second?
recess until
Yeah.
6:30.
Second, John Lee.
All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. We'll have a break.
Well, you guys got 30 minutes to go.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why we gotta wait till.
Anyway, thank you, guys.
Second, Green.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, so we'll pick up where we left off, and so we're at the point in the meeting, point on the agenda, that we'll take public input on non-agenda items. So if there's anybody out there that wants to come forward and speak about something that is not on the agenda, now is time to do that. Okay? Yeah. No. So now, seeing none, we'll close the floor to public input on non-agenda items. And one thing that Commissioner Jungling has just brought to my attention, I believe we missed approval of last month's meeting minutes. And so can we get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last week, or last month?
I'll make motion to approve, John Lee.
When do you second?
Second, Sweeter.
All right, very good. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, now we will move on to public hearing. Mr. Brown? Or,
Michelle Jansen's letter, do you want to read that under public?
I guess I thought I'd do it under, during public comment after you.
Yep.
Yep. This is what we typically do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Toby Brown with County Planning. So we do have one item on the agenda for a business item this evening. It is the public hearing for the remanded ordinances. And so we put this as one item, but essentially it's 5 different ordinances, which are draft ordinances that have been remanded by the Board of Commissioners. And I think one of the things that staff talked a little bit about is, I guess 2 parts to that is I think we've talked about these all enough. Other than number 5, we do need to have some communication with. That wasn't drafted by staff, that was drafted by Commissioner Otten and Commissioner Putnam. So we won't address that. I know legal counsel's got some comments on that particular ordinance. I have some general kind of ideas that talk about, went back and listened to the Board of Commissioners meetings that they remanded them back. There was some specific content that they asked the Planning Commission to look at, and I've put some thoughts together on that as just kind of discussion talking points. ultimately, I think what everybody would want out of this, can't speak for the Board of Commissioners, but is that the Planning Commission would ultimately recommend an ordinance out of this meeting or potentially future meeting to kind of address some of the topics that I believe the Board of Commissioners wants addressed. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and I apologize for jumping around, but I just got some topics, I guess, to talk about. First thing is, on all four ordinances, again, these four ordinances were drafted by staff in coordination with the ad hoc committee that was, believe it or not, I think about 2 years ago now almost, that they had met. But out of that ad hoc committee, that committee really recommended framework for carbon dioxide pipeline ordinances. And each of those has the same definitions in it that were pulled from from federal statute, I guess, would be the way to say it. And one of the things that, the staff has spent some time on is just reviewing the ordinances, reviewing specifically kind of the county commissioner's guidance on that. And one of the things they talked about was the definitions. And so when staff was really looking at these definitions, again, these are from Code of Federal Regulations, we went back and looked at the other regulations that the county had. And so one of the talking points I think I would start out is, we'd almost recommend maybe you don't have these definitions. From the standpoint that we don't really define gas or oil or those different types of things. There's many term uses that we don't really define, other than they are just term uses, such as carbon dioxide. And one of the things that, and I've done this periodically, I've just asked people, like for the definition of carbon dioxide, a fluid consisting of more than 90% carbon dioxide molecules. That's pretty scientific. I mean, it's pretty based with what that is. But does that, from a regulatory standpoint at the federal level is a little different than a regulatory standpoint at the local level with us, are we potentially opening ourselves up with, I'm not even saying this is feasible, but just for the talking, is what if they proposed an 88%, carbon dioxide pipeline? Then what do we do? Are we circumventing our ability to regulate this as a land use? So typically land use is a lot of times we don't really get into the critical definitions like this. We just term it out as a land use. So say carbon dioxide pipeline. So I guess, and I've discussed this with legal too, is that, one recommendation we'd have is just don't have definitions for these items. It would just be carbon dioxide pipeline be the term use with it. And that would allow us, number one is we're not getting real technical with it, but number two is it allow us some flexibility to really address the issues that we have, because we'd hate to have a technicality come up where they propose an 88% pipeline and then we're like, well, I guess that's not regulated with it. So that's one thing. And then one thing was, this was on the original remand from the Board of Commissioners. They really wanted the board to give a recommendation on a fee. And so one of the things that we've looked at is if you go back to the Senate bill that was referred and ultimately denied by the voters, one of the things in there that was somewhat kind of advantageous would be the pipeline fee, is that the county would get a per dollar per line fee, and so that could be an annual basis or a one-time fee. But and I'm not saying that most people want the pipeline, but I'm just saying that maybe we should have a provision in there that we would get a potential fee off of this with it. And so we would recommend somewhat of a line pipe fee with it, like dollar per foot or whatever it would be and stuff like that. So, and I should say all these things that I'm bringing up, we haven't prepared a draft before you. We wanted you to discuss these things, and then with that discussion would give staff more direction about how you would want these types of things addressed within the ordinances. And then one of the things that's kind of stuck with me is since the original Planning Commission public hearing is that Eric Boak, who's a resident of the county, just lives outside of town, he brought up the issue of having a floor on the setback. And the Planning Commission ultimately recommended that we would recommend that there be a floor put on by the Board of Commissioners, but I think that maybe we need to come up with what that number is. And one of the numbers that we're consistently hearing is that 500 foot range. And so, that would recommend that, if you could do the floor on, if you like the 1, 2, 3, or 4 ordinances, you could do the floor of 500 foot on there. And I know there's been a lot of dialogue about where the 500 foot come from. and things like that. But I would say that the county has for a long time been very consistent with 500 foot with our notification. And I think the county's established that that's a notification area. I don't think it has anything to do with safety. I don't think it has to do anything with what a pipeline can do or not do. I think that's consistently what we've utilized for a notification area. So I think there is some precedence with 500 foot being somewhat of a setback. And then the fourth thing is really, I think, what Commissioner Landine really brought up, which I think invoked a lot of thought with staff. And that's with, and this was one of the ordinances, and again, at the original planning commission, you recommended a denial on option 1 and 2, you recommended approval of 3 and 4, which 3 and 4 are a little bit different. 3 is a conditional use and 4 was a rezone. But Commissioner Landine, I think, made some comments about the definitions and about those different types of things. And I think what she was really referencing was something that I said at the public comment, was that, this would be more appropriate if it was above ground structures. It would be a way that we would rezone it. We do that typically with all types of land uses. That if you're, the idea of, and I think, staff agrees, it's a little absurd to think that we would have a 30-mile sliver of industrial zone throughout the entire county, as opposed to just looking at the individual structures. And so, in between all of these things, again, staff has continued the research. I've routinely mentioned that PHMSA's come out with some advisory guidelines. It's 340 pages of fun reading if you want to take the time to do it, but I think it's very informative and educational. The other thing is that, the pipeline has submitted an application to PUC, and in that application, they're proposing to put essentially 6 above-ground structures in Lincoln County. Those would be valves and different types of facilities, and those would be interspersed throughout the county. And so one of the comments or thoughts you had is with the rezone, you could, again, if we remove the definitions, you could explicitly just put for above ground structures. And we have the names for all 6 of those things. It's valves and it's different types of things. They're not proposing a pump station in the county, but they are proposing the valves and the pig launcher and some of those different types of structures. And so, and again, one of the things that we've consistently talked about, and I think one of the challenges that we've had is this going to get preempted by the state or the federal entities? And so, consistently though, I think you guys are well aware of this, is the above ground structures, the natural gas, they essentially replaced every above ground natural gas structure in the county in the last 2.5 years. We did conditional use permits on essentially every single one of those ones. And so, it's, we consistently treat those as requiring conditional uses for the above ground type structures. But, this potential change there is you do above ground structures. And then I want to talk a little bit, and I'll throw a huge thing out here, is that, one of the things that as we're preparing to revise the zoning regulations, we're looking back at historically to see kind of where did we come out, how did we get to where we are today with a lot of regulations. And I mentioned it briefly at the work session that, the most amended section of the zoning ordinances are concentrated animal feeding operations ordinances. And one of the things that I think that historically looking back, and none of us were a part of that, I can only read into what the minutes or the history or some of the people that I knew who were involved at that time have had discussions with, is that the board really set the minimum setback of 1,320, a quarter mile, or 0.25, based on the premise of, and I'll say this because it's still, the setback is still 1,320 for a Class C and a Class D. But from what I can tell from history is that there wasn't really any huge logic to that, establishing that setback. There wasn't any scientific data analysis or, safety or those different types of things. And you're well aware that, and some of you haven't had a CAFO application, but the county has a process that we utilize through South Dakota State University called the odor footprint tool. So every concentrated animal feeding operation has to go through that. Consistently, every time we've done that, it's proven that our setback is greater than it needs to be if you base it on smell and odor. But when you look back historically, when the board established the 1,320, they really said one thing. They said, out of sight, out of mind. So, and I think historically, you look back at that and you say, why did they establish it? It wasn't really based on smell or odor, or, nuisance or those kind of things. It really was the mindset that this is a setback that we feel is at a distance where people aren't going to see it enough that they're going to be concerned about it. It's kind of like I just had to do it last night. You drive through Sioux City and you start to smell and you're like, where's that coming from? It's like, where's that at? And so I think really that's what that setback was. And so I would throw that out there as an idea that, potentially is that for above ground structures and the hardest public hearings we ever do are the above ground structures when we did the natural gas ones. Because a lot of people said the same thing, it's not pleasing to look at, they put a chain link fence around them, they don't screen it or anyway and stuff like that. Is that you could look back historically and say that, for CAFOs that we did have an out of sight, out of mind setback. We've consistently enforced that. And I'm not saying that's a right or a wrong or those different types of things, but that was the logistics and the justification for what that setback is, so. But those were kind of four discussion topics wanted to throw out there to see if the board wanted to take a look at these current ordinances, modify them, do some different types of things. I think out of anything, and then I'll turn it back to the chair and Commissioner Ott can talk a little bit about her ordinance, but I think ultimately is that we all want this to come out of here with a good recommendation. One that's consistent with what the public wants, but one that's consistent with what's going to allow us to have a good regulatory ordinance as well too, which is going to be a challenge. But those are just some talking points that we have from there. I'll gladly talk about the other four ordinances in more detail, but I think you've all heard that enough of that part of it. But again, these four talking points are things that I think the Board of Commissioners wants the Planning Commission to take a look at. So.
Questions for Toby?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner.
Toby, when you talked about the 1320, you mentioned a different model. What was that you said you used before?
The South Dakota Order Footprint Tool?
Okay.
Yeah. So that just requires us to actually do a scientific analysis of a proposed CAFO operation as far as their odor nuisance. So again, I would argue that the board's established 1320 as an out of sight, out of mind.
Does this county have the staff and the ability to do those scientific researches? Are that usually hired out? How's that work?
South Dakota State has a model for it.
Okay. So you
For the
got-
CAFOs, yeah.
Okay.
No.
Yep.
No, I mean, is the 1320 enough for a pipeline setback? I think the public will tell you no. I'm just telling you that there's established as an out of sight, out of mind, and this above ground structures is potentially an out of sight, out of mind. So.
And when you're talking about that, you're talking about having a setback for the pipeline itself and a setback for the above ground structures. They
That's
could
up
be
to you
completely
guys. I
different.
was just saying the above ground structures.
But we could do that and have them just
Sure.
be completely different.
Sure, yep.
And have the rezoning, each individual structure would have its own rezone.
Potentially.
Yep,
Or you could just do it as a conditional use with the setback too, so,
sure, yeah. But we could rezone each above ground structure.
sure,
Yep.
yep.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Toby, refresh my memory with the state item that was voted down and as it relates to fee structures. If we're going to take the fee structures thing up in this, were there proposed fee structures in that? I don't recall exactly what they were, and if you could refresh me on that.
Yeah, I don't want to say what the exact number was because I don't recall that, but yes, there was a.
Or if you have a recommendation on potentially what?
Well, I mean, there's been different drafts that we've seen that are $1 per line foot, something like that. And then it would be depending, do you want to do it a one-time fee, or do you want to do it an annual fee, or those different types of things. But
Right.
there's definitely, I'll say that there's already been quite an investment of staff time in this topic, as far as that, but if the pipeline gets approved and if it gets placed in the county, there's going to be a significant amount of staff time in that as far as, different ongoing things, I would say, activities that we'll have to deal with. But in saying that, Commissioner, I think that part of the discussion is if that's the angle direction you want to go, we would prepare a draft to how that would look and share it with you. Yeah.
And I assume that would take some level of, when we start talking setbacks and how restrictive they are, I assume fees kind of get into that same deal where fees could be overly burdensome, but whether, I don't know, so. Thank you, Toby.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Toby, the definitions, weren't they requested by the Board of Commissioners to put those in?
I don't think originally they were.
Okay.
I think the ad hoc committee was the first time we actually put definitions
Okay.
together.
That's correct.
And we pulled those out of the federal regulations,
Okay.
you know.
That's correct.
But, the state has definitions, the other ones have definitions. And this board is very well aware of, I'll remind you, garden centers. If you recall, we don't have a definition for garden center. Absent a definition of garden center, you come up with Webster's version of what that definition is. So.
And the reason, what happened there is there was multiple ordinances that had already been presented before the ad hoc committee. And they all had different definitions in them, and we felt like that was, the ad hoc committee felt like, well, we should kind of gather everything up and at least have the same definitions and have the same starting point, and so then that's where that came from.
So I'll feed off that. That is correct. So prior to that, we did have some applications from citizens to amend the regulations. Each of those definitions was different, and they were modified definitions. I believe if anybody said anything, especially the ad hoc committee, they said, let's pull these so they're really mean definitions. So it was like, from the Code of Federal Regulations. But as we looked at these definitions, the Code of Federal Regulations isn't local land use. So we want to make sure that we're, we're looking at land use terms. We're not looking at defining what these terms are, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown, so, of the bullet points that I guess I got here that you had spoke on, definitions you'd like to, you're recommending maybe we just, rethink that and drop them, and I understand that, yeah, I mean, if you bring a 88% carbon, or a carbon deal, then it's, that makes perfect sense to me. Adding a fee structure, putting a floor, rezoning the above-ground structures, and then potentially having a setback, and one that could be different on the actual route of the pipeline versus the above-ground structures. Okay? And currently, is there any of the ordinances that would cover maybe those recommendations and concerns that you have?
Well, I think 3 and 4 is very similar to Commissioner Otten's ordinance.
Yep.
Minus some additional detail information. And I take it from the public and from the board, from our previous public hearings, that nobody's really in favor of just having staff approve these as permissive uses. So that's what 1 and 2 essentially are. And I want to dig in a little bit deeper on the definitions too, is that these definitions that we're looking at right now, those are crafted by the feds. They've crafted those definitions for an intent and a purpose that they have. That might be not an intent and purpose that we have under a local regulation. And so a number of our uses, our term uses, such as storage units and such as those different types of things, we don't have a specific clear definition for what that is, but we know what that land use term is, if that makes sense, so.
Speaking of Mr. Bogue, you were talking about him when he shows
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Probably delayed on the TV, so you can.
Very good.
So I appreciate letting us kind of share those thoughts with you. I think that it's, again, these are ideas that I believe the Board of Commissioners, and I won't speak for them or if they have other ideas, but those were really the concepts, I think, when they remanded it back to you. And above anything, we want to make sure we take the time to send something back up to them that is something reflective of what you guys as a board wants, but what they want as a board too, so. Okay? So I would, again, though, I'd turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
But I believe number 5, the current remanded ordinance by Commissioner Otten, you might want to talk to her a little bit more about what that entails. And then I believe legal counsel can assist with some of that discussion too.
Okay,
So,
very good.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Brown. So we'll do that. Commissioner Otten, do you want to speak to the fifth option a bit?
Thank you.
Yep.
Doug isn't here. He was he was actually the one that started this, and he's under the weather, so he wasn't able to be here today. But this has gone on so long, and I think he brought it forward because we listened to all the public input. We listened to the Carbon Dioxide Transport Storage Advisory Committee. We talked with landowners, we talked with all kinds of people, and Eric, I think I talked to you earlier today on a text, but what we did is we didn't want it to be, I know that there was not a full backing of 1 through 4, so that's why we put this together, and we actually, we did it from the property line instead of the house, and there are several other counties that do that same thing, Brown, McPherson, Minnehaha, and so all of those do it from the property line. And the reason that we went with that was because of the building eligibilities. If you have land and you have nothing built on that, you could have your 4 eligibilities, and this would take away your right to build wherever you wanted to on your own property. And that's why we went with the property line, and most everybody that we talked to agreed that we should always start with where the property line is, not where the house is, mainly because it's a property rights addition where that's your property, and we don't want the state, the county, or townships or anything taking away the rights of people that want to have a building eligibility, but there's nothing built on there yet. So if that helps you, that's what we did. So
Okay.
if there's any other questions, we went through a lot of this before, so if you have any questions, we did change from our original, after talking with Drew, our attorney, we did take out the old section 5, and we took out the 4-inch diameter on the original and just left it as 500 feet, because that is the established, after talking with Toby and Doug and Drew, we all talked together that we took that out and just left it as the 500 feet, but we did not put a diameter pipeline in there. And we just left it to planning and zoning then, if they needed to have a deeper setback, that planning and zoning in this ordinance could do that. Questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Otten, so those changes you just mentioned, are those in front of us here? So we've not seen those yet.
I can speak to some of that a little bit, Commissioner. And so there are additional changes, and we talked to Commissioner Otten and Commissioner Putnam about the references. We reviewed it, how this, and I'll start this off, as Toby and Toby said this, we're not policymakers. We review these ordinances, how they would be implemented into our current code of ordinances. So the changes would be, there's references for the conditional uses under I, it'd actually be FF. To meet our current code of ordinances. The section numbering, that needs to change, so those would be the changes if you direct staff to change those. Another one would be under conditional uses for light industrial, that would change from FF to G. there was just the correlation of it within the Code of Ordinances wasn't meeting to what we have. It actually, some of them would circumvent what we already have in place in the Code of Ordinances if the current references would maintain their numbering or lettering. Same thing with the carbon dioxide pipeline system under 154.138, that would change from GG to H. The recommendation to Commissioner Otten and Commissioner Putnam, if they wanted to leave consequence that they had, was the notification process. Under the current structure they have in the ordinance, it actually supersede our notification for WEX and KFOs. So what it would be is actually an amendment to the notifications for WEX and KFOs to include a 2-mile notification process for any conditional uses for a pipeline ordinances. Again, I reviewed it just from how it would be applicable into our current Code of Ordinances, advised Commissioner Otten on some of the unintended consequences of some of the numbering and lettering within the Code of Ordinances. Ultimately, again, we're not policymakers. I think about a year and a half now, I've been up here advising, it can't be regulated on safety, it needs to be zoning. You as policymakers, that's your decision when you're reading an ordinance and whether you believe the intent of it is regulation on zoning or is it safety regulated driven. That's up to the policymakers and not as legal. We can only advise of some of the things we see and some of the changes that we'd recommend make. So happy to answer any other questions you have.
Questions for Mr. DeGroat? So what I'm kind of hearing you say is there's some things that need to be
Yes.
cleaned up.
Yep, there's some things to be cleaned
Yep.
up, and Commissioner
And it sounds
Otten-
like you guys have visited about this and
Yep,
so forth and.
And with Doug as well.
Yeah, so Commissioner Otten and Commissioner Putnam had,
Sure.
we talked about just plume modeling, and they recommended removal of the plume modeling and that but the same requirements that they need to provide their plume models to planning and zoning. And then just some of those amendments, the unintended consequence for their formula that a 4-inch diameter at 500 foot. Well, if you have, right now under the Summit Carbon application, there's 24-inch pipe and 2 6-inch pipes. There's no 4-inch pipe. So technically, there would be no floor for those diameters because it only references 4-inch. So just some of those unintended consequences. Again, those were just advisement, and then Commissioner Otten and Commissioner Putnam took that under advisement and said they'd like those changes made, but at the end of the day, it's up to the policymakers on the full breadth of the ordinance and whether they think it's sufficient or not.
Sure. Thank you much.
Yep.
Okay. With that, I think we'll open the floor to public comment and just because the scope of things, instead of going for and against, I think we're just gonna flat open the floor to public comment. So, does anybody want to start? I have one letter to read in when, kind of at the end here, so. No, go ahead, no. People that are here, we'll let you speak first.
Thank you. Sarah Stever, Lennox, South Dakota, 46850, 276th Street. So are you saying that the ordinance that's posted publicly is not the one that we're actually talking about? So how is a person supposed to speak to the ordinance if it's not there? Because I can't take notes as fast as you talked.
Yeah, sorry about that. Again, we're not the policymakers, so those were recommended changes. It's up to the planning commission if they think those changes are necessary or if they want those changes to be made. They could say, legal, you don't know what you're talking about. We want those changes to stay there. We want the 4-inch diameter to remain the same. We want the plume modeling to stay the same. So it's not for me to change Commissioner Otten's. It was up to her. We made the recommendations. And it's up to the planning commission to determine whether those should stay the same or not.
Okay, so we should just speak to it as it is, I presume? Either in
Correct.
favor or
Correct.
against?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would like to speak in favor of what you guys do have for a number of reasons. I really appreciated the fact that we're actually going to notify residents within the affected area, partially because you're now rezoning into, the above ground would be rezoned, the below ground would be conditional use. So there's a notification process that I think is really important, and I think having it based on PHMSA's emergency planning zone, which is 2 miles, is the ideal distance from the pipeline and the above ground areas to have the notification happen for people, because I think they need to understand that. There's a reason I believe why PHMSA picked that distance. The definitions are baked into this, so that's going to get a pretty substantial rewrite, I presume. I like the idea that the things out above ground are light industrial zoned and below ground agricultural. I think that seems reasonable and a reasonable concession. I want to speak in favor of the public plume model, and I want to speak in favor of scaling based on the plume model. And I also want to, partially because I think it's really important what the plume model is. And computational fluid dynamics is the gold standard of models. There are, and I've read a bunch of these now, Aloha, HG Systems, SLAB, SciPuff, FAST, and TRACE. Not as good. They're not as good. And those models were the models that were used in Satartia. And in Satartia, nobody anticipated that the city would actually be impacted. But if you read the failure investigation report from Denbury Gulf Coast Pipelines, what they say was pipeline operators are required to establish atmospheric models to prepare for emergencies. Denbury's model did not contemplate a release that could impact the village of Satartia. So 45 people sent to the hospital, 200 people evacuated, and nobody thought the plume would get there. So I think it's an important thing when thinking about the plume models, and I'd like to see that retained, because it does matter, and I think the public deserves to know what those plume models say. I think it's highly inappropriate that a private company can come in and run a study like that and then not allow people to know the impact. And speaking of impact, and because in celebration of having a comprehensive plan, I did a count of how many quarter sections the pipeline actually runs through. It's about 109 from what I can tell from the maps. So if you take as one example, the Brandview development east of Canton is selling acre lots for $250,000. Over by Lennox, you can find a 5-acre lot for about $184,000. So that would give you a range of about $642 million to about $4.36 billion of land development in our county that's going to be impacted by this. So it has a huge economic development impact. So I'm also in favor of having this be from the property line and not from the structure line. This pipeline's going to be underground quite possibly forever. And so in 25 years from now, when we're doing the 2050 comprehensive plan, wouldn't it be nice if we actually had something rational for our responsible development of our county? And then my next to last point would really be just reinforcing for you that property line and the takings clause, and the idea that if you may be doing an inverse taking on a neighbor if there is no sort of way for them to have some recourse if a pipeline is put close to their structures as well, or their land. So I'd like you to maybe consider that. I like the idea of taking carbon dioxide out of the definitions. I think that's a good idea, but those other definitions are really key to how the whole this whole thing is built. So unless it's going to change the language through the whole thing, in which case above ground and underground, I guess if that can be really nailed down, that would be good. It just seemed like it was logical to follow what the feds were doing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Can I respond to that?
We can, yeah, go ahead and ask her questions if you want.
I'm going to bring up that plume thing, that we took that section, we took section 5 out, because right after where all the definitions are in, under FF, it talks about the carbon dioxide sections and all the plume modeling in there. So we didn't think we needed to put it in twice.
Okay, as long as it's retained.
It is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Next.
Good evening. Rodney Miles, Lennox, South Dakota. I concur with both Betty and Sarah as far as we need to keep these measurements from the property lines. Basically, I can show you 3 different building sites that have been purchased out by Klondike Oil and Louise Avenue that nothing's been built on them, but they have been purchased. One has a shelter belt already starting to be established. And those people need to be able to utilize every square inch of that property. They shouldn't be told they can't build in the northeast corner or the southwest corner or anything like that. So I believe we need to keep that from the property lines. Second thing I'm kind of wondering about is the waivers that we're putting in, that people can sign a waiver and allow the pipeline to go onto their properties. How does that affect adjacent landowners who would basically lose the protection of an ordinance for the development of their land? And can we put something in that basically says if somebody signs a waiver, it's like going down to NRCS or, you know, whatever, if you do something that could possibly impact adjacent landowners' properties, they have to sign a waiver also allowing this to go through. I think that's an important point that everybody seems to be missing, that basically this one person can give permission for a pipeline to go across their property, but it could affect an awful lot of people right beside that and stuff. So I guess I'm here to basically talk about the setbacks, and I've given you all the handouts for the PIPA information. And basically what PIPA is a branch of PHMSA and the Department of Transportation. And they basically are like an ad hoc committee. And they're made up from members of the Department of Transportation to the members of the transportation pipeline companies, public, county, federal, you name it. It's a vast assortment of, you know, input that goes into these recommendations. And they have a recommendation as far as for counties, local governments, to allow building to any hazardous pipeline. And they have basically a standard setback based on a natural gas pipeline. And that starts out at 660 to 1,000 feet. They say basically you need to adjust it for pipe diameter that is either larger or smaller than what the standard average is. And a 24-inch pipeline is almost double the size of what a standard average pipeline is for natural gas. So if you do that, add another 660 to 1,000 feet. And then it also goes in to say basically you need to increase or decrease for pressures that are greater than average standards. And the average standard is between 12 and 1,400 pounds. This is 2,200 pounds of pressure. You're almost double again. But then lastly, that directly pertains to CO2 pipelines, it says that you must, again, adjust the setback for building to a pipeline. It doesn't say as far as, you know, strictly a pipeline building, but in a common sense world, you would say it should be the same either way, whether you're building to a pipeline or a pipeline's building to a, you know, a structure. And it basically says you need to increase that for contents heavier than air, which CO2 is. So basically, if you take and add 660 to 1,000 feet from that original, you have 2,640 to 4,000 feet range for a setback that basically has stood the test of the PUC because both Spink and Edmonds County both have 2,640 feet. McPherson is 5,000 some feet. And all of those stood up at the last PUC permit hearings. So there should be no problem where the numbers come from to defend those numbers and put a decent, you know, setback that is reasonable. I know Toby mentioned, you know, the PHMSA report that come out, and if you look in there, I think it's page 105 or something like that, PHMSA's actually recommending 2-mile setbacks. So 2,640 feet is not too much compared to what they are coming out with their findings from the incident in Sartasia. And like I say, both Edmonds and Spink both have 2,640, and I think that's a good range to start with. And if you want to increase it up to 4,000, even better yet. But I guess, like I said, the one thing I'm certainly would like to see addressed would be, besides the numbers, is that waiver thing. And shouldn't people that are impacted by one person signing a waiver be entitled to the same protection, same rights to develop their property, and have to sign a waiver also for it to go through that property? Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Mr. Vanentop?
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging with us here.
Oh, yeah. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm here to talk about Commissioner Otten's and Commissioner Putnam's ordinance. I think it's about as good as we've had so far put in front of us. The only thing I guess I would maybe want to talk about or have you consider would be depth of cover. And I guess where I'm going with that is I spent close to 2 hours one night listening to a webinar with two industry experts with PHMSA. And so that's kind of how I got started thinking about this. It's like they threw out, you need to define depth of cultivation. Well, we all know you don't plant corn 4 foot in the ground, but there's other things that happen in the ag world, such as drain tile and that sort of thing. So, and that's more of a common practice than not. I will tell you that all the properties that I own, they're all tiled. So that could be anywhere from 4 to 7 to who knows what, if you got to go through a rise, right? So, so I think that's something that you need to think about. The other thing would be whatever that depth is determined at, I feel like the pipeline company needs to maintain that depth through the history. And because I could cite an example that I'm living with on a year-to-year basis is that we have a property that we've been farming since the early 70s, and it has Magellan pipeline going through it. There's 2 lines, and one line is fine. The other line, you know, he comes out every year and gets his tool and finds the depth, and 4 feet, 4 feet, 4 feet, 16 inches, 4 feet. Well, so now we have this area that it's in a water course, but we can't fill it in because, you know, we got the waters of the United States and it's a blue line ditch, and so what do you do? So we have to mark it every year to make sure we don't, because now that I know about it, we're responsible. And so when that sort of thing happens, what I'm worried about is Magellan's been great to work with. They said, well, we can fence it off, we can turn it into grass, we can do whatever. It's not a huge area, but my concern is that if you have a different company come in here, all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you guys, you can't farm this easement anymore. And I think that's where this could be a real problem, is we should really look at putting in there that they're responsible for making that depth stay. So, with that.
Not on the landowner.
Yeah, right, because that's, you know, however it works, they need to maintain that depth, whatever that depth may be. So, that's what I got, so.
Quick question, Jason. What, do you have a rough idea what you think the proper depth would be? I mean, I agree with you, when you get into pattern, you get into field tiling and things like this, it's all
Well,
over the
so-
place, but 4 foot is a pretty standard, I mean, 6 foot, I don't even know what they're proposing for a depth, or are they, or
Well, so Dayton Township's ordinance, we said 7.
7 feet, okay?
But, my wife always says, you know, we bury our dead 6. You know, I don't know what's right. but- I don't know what she's thinking, but,
I'd be a little worried about that.
yeah,
She's-
I still love her. But, yeah, so anyway,
Good save.
yeah, but, so, yeah, so, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good point. Very good. Mr. Montgomery, how are you tonight?
Very good.
Good.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Scott Montgomery, Fairview, South Dakota. I'd like to add a little bit to what Mr. Miles was saying about doubling the size of the pipeline and the pressure. If you double the size of a 12-inch pipeline, the 12-inch pipeline has 113 square inches of volume. If you double that to 24, that turns out to be 452 square inches of volume. 4 times the volume. So doubling the size of the pipe quadruples the volume in there. So we can't say they're doubling. It's way more than that. And a natural gas pipeline runs, I think, around 700 pounds. That's going to be running over 2,000, so that's 3 times. So that's something I think we need to take in consideration. Another thing I'd really like to talk about is setbacks. I mean, I don't know how we ever decided to set back from a house. I own the property to the property line. I don't own much, 100 by 150, but that's my little kingdom. And I don't think you should be able to come and take 1 inch of that. I mean, if you want to come and build something next to me, my property line, not for my house. And I think we ought to honor that to everybody. I mean, you guys are no different. What you own is yours. And we shouldn't allow them to say, well, we'll come this far from your house. How about from my property line? That's mine, my little kingdom, and I know people own bigger kingdoms, but mine's important to me, and I think we ought to consider that with everybody here that owns property. Something else I'd like to talk about is the economics here. The pipeline keeps telling us how wonderful they're gonna be for the economy, but how about if we just examine taking 1/4 of land, and somebody comes along and populates it with homes? What are the taxes going to be on just that 1/4 versus what we'll ever get from the pipeline? That's just 1/4. The reality is Lincoln County is growing, and I think we need to do everything we can to protect the economy of Lincoln County, whatever that takes. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm against the pipeline, but I think we need to get them to adhere to where our economy is the best we can be for our economy. And I think I'm asking this board to do that. I'm fully supporting this new ordinance of Betty's. The other 4, we've hashed those over, and we can't get those passed. I think we ought to pitch them in the garbage can and work on this new item. I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Hurley, how are you?
I'm excellent, thanks. Good evening, Lynn Hurley, 48032, 277th, Canton, South Dakota. So I have about 8 questions.
Okay.
I can expand that if that's quite not enough.
Only 8, huh?
Only 8. Mr. Chairman and respected committee members, thanks for doing this evening. We really appreciate it. I want to step back a little bit. My experience in dealing with these kind of issues is that we get so focused on the detail. Item 562 subsection C, FFE, that we forget the bigger picture, the 30,000-foot picture. And we sometimes get tentative of really asking for what we really want, okay? Because we haven't really done that. We're really Midwestern nice, we're respectful of people, we want to grow the economy, all those kinds of things. But if you look at the overview, right, 30,000 feet, the Supreme Court ruled they're not a common carrier, right? That's already been decided. When we think about setbacks and think about that, we think about utilities. Southeastern Electric, South Lincoln Rural Water, those kind of people we deal with that we know act in good faith, good neighbors, we see them at church, the kids go to school, cheer for them at the basketball games, all those kinds of things. This whole process has already been voted down twice by the voters, right? So without going into that history, I just want us to not be tentative about what we really need. So a couple of these things are, $1 a foot, are you kidding me? That's insane. So we recently met with Summit Carbon, right? And it was my wife and I, Marilyn, met with them and our son Luke, and it was educational. Their first comment was, Lincoln County does not have a setback. And I said, well, you're within 1,000 feet of our home. You know, we built this 30 years ago. No, there's no setback. We can go wherever the hell we want to go. So we asked them to move it. Yeah, we can move it. I said, but now you're going to be closer to these people. Well, there's no setback. And they reported all the setbacks to the counties in South Dakota that they deal with. My memory's not the best, but I think Minnehaha County was like 350. McCook was around 500. Turner was 550. And, you know, I take that personal because my setback, which Toby referenced, and I can echo those compliments about Toby. He and his team are awesome. We dealt with them when we built several livestock buildings, and our setback is, the minimum setback is 1,320 feet, with proper notification and approval of many of the neighbors, right? So 1,320 feet for a swine operation that raises 10-pound pigs to 250 pounds. Other than small manure, which we put back into the soil, there's not a lot to be fearful of, right? We complied with all the aquifer regulations and all those kinds of things. These people want to come 500 feet from my house. And you know all the plume studies, I'm not going to bore you with all that stuff. And I really appreciated the comment about out of sight, out of mind. In visiting with them, that's their goal. There's nothing here for all of us to see. We can see a prison, we can see a hog unit, we can see Josh Larson's cattle yard, and his setback is much further than ours. So I want to respectfully ask that we get bold enough to ask what we need in the county, okay? The money to support services. We had a fire in our house December 20th. Those fire department people were there in 18 minutes. How are they going to respond to a catastrophe 500 feet from this building, or 800 feet, wherever it's going to be? Because there are no setbacks, according to them. So they came in with their fire extinguishers. What kind of tools are they going to have? And Marilyn and I asked Summit that, and they said, well, we're going to provide $50,000 for every community we go by for their fire department. I said, $50,000? That doesn't buy a pickup and a small tanker, right? Well, it's quite a gesture. I said, it's a meaningless gesture. There's no training, there's no uniforms. That's a joke. So that's more commentary than questions, I apologize. So my first question was, 500 feet is insignificant and insufficient. And Commissioner Otten, about going to the property line, so we have a piece of property that I believe we have 8 housing eligibilities, right? And unless those 8 housing eligibilities, Toby, you can correct me, but unless they're platted, they don't show up. So in this property where they want to run this 24-inch pipeline, I have 8 housing eligibilities, but they don't show up. They're not recognized in this document. So unless I quick plat them, which costs money, and I don't know exactly where I want them, they can run that pipeline anywhere, and it's coming from where I live now and where my house is platted, but not for what I want to do for the future. Kids coming back to farm, we'd like to build 4 houses. I don't know where you put them because we got this pipeline. Does that make sense? Okay. So there has to be something identified about future growth. The other thing from a 30,000-foot view is, I think your position is more important than you think, and this ruling is more important than you think, because if we lose eminent domain this month or next month, based on what happens in Pier, your document is the only defense we have. That's it. And if we lose eminent domain, they will come in and run right over us. So please consider that as you draft this. Thank you. So I guess my ask is you take the lead. I really don't care what Minnehaha County does. I don't know if any of those commissioners own much farmland in Lincoln County. Maybe they do. But I don't care what Lincoln, or what Minnehaha County does, or Turner County. I care what we do. And again, thank you so much for your hard work here.
That was only like 4 questions, Lynn. You must have some more.
Marilyn might
Thank you.
My name is Marilyn Hurley, 48032 277th Street, Camp, South Dakota. And I had a question about the setbacks. In the original printout, it talked about 500 feet for a 4-inch. And so what you're proposing, is that just going to be standard for everything? So if it's 24 inches by our house, it's still 500 feet? Is that what the proposal is?
May I answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
We had it as 4-inch, but there is no 4-inch that Summit is using. So we took out that because it just didn't work in here because there is no 4-inch pipe that they're using, correct?
So will it go up? So is it just 500? Or will
It's 500 for whatever they're going to put in, but if it needs to be greater, a greater setback, in this ordinance, planning and zoning can do that, make it greater.
So
Without putting the 4-inch pipe in.
Right.
We can just put in as the 500-foot setback from the property line, and then if it needs to be greater, then planning and zoning can come back and make it a greater setback.
just as when is that made greater? It's not in the document, when do you then decide what that distance is for a 24-inch? When they get a permit, or?
When they seek a conditional use permit.
When they get the permit, then you would say, based on this area, it's 24-inch here, so the setback would be here. If it's, at that point, is when?
Yeah, so they apply for a conditional use permit, and then at that point, if they submit their plume modeling and all the other requirements, then the planning commission or planning and zoning department, however you read it, could then make a determination that it's a setback.
Okay.
Correct.
And following up on something my husband said, we did have a fire, and they were there within 3 minutes, and we asked the gentleman at our meeting, I said, the firefighters were there, they saved our house, they were there 3 to 5 minutes, the first 2 were, and the fire department here in Canton, they're looking for volunteers. I said, who is going, they signed up to help their neighbors and their friends. Fires, how are you going to get people to use the 50,000 in equipment? And he told us that they will have a person, full-time person, staffed at every ethanol site?
Ethanol plant.
And I said, so for me, and he goes, well, that's at Chancellor. So I said, well, that's 30 to 40 minutes. I said, that doesn't do me a lot of good. So that's what they're thinking is enough if somebody's 40 minutes away. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
I apologize,
Find the rest of
Mr.
your
Chairman.
questions?
I did find another question. Yeah, might be slow, but I'm not stupid. Has any of you seen the easement document from Summit? If you would like to see that, we can provide you a copy. Here would be some discerning comments in there that really gave us heartburn. In the easement conditions, it says the easement may be sold, mortgaged, assigned. We can build on it without your approval. So if they don't like Carbon, or if Carbon provides the kind of profits they're talking about, maybe we'll put solar there. I cannot stop them from constructing something above ground. We are actually, in the easement document, it's about, that section is fairly lengthy, but it was, and we asked them twice. They can assign it, they can sell it, they can mortgage it. I said, mortgage it. So I mean, if I want to remortgage my property or whatever, you're going to have a mortgage on that 100-foot easement? Yes, sir. So we'll be happy to provide that document to you. And I said, why is this in here? Oh, don't worry, it's standard boilerplate. You know, we'll change that. We'll tell you what, you tell us, you send us an email of what you want in there. And I said, now, wait a minute. There's some people you're dealing with that are 80 years old. Why don't you apply this to everybody you deal with then? So we'll send you we'll send a copy of that language, but it's very unnerving. The other question about this ordinance here, is it retroactive? Because they said they have it was a high percentage of people that have signed it up already. So if that path is in someone's property that's already signed the document, I know someone 3 miles from us have already signed it, does that influence the direction of the pipeline then?
That's a good question.
Okay. They were very proud to say that McCook is 100% signed up, Minnehaha is a very high percentage, and we'll have the rest of Lincoln County pretty quickly. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. That brings up, Drew, well, go ahead, Mr. Montgomery. I'll ask Drew later.
I do have one question for Betty. The present setback in Lincoln County is 1320, correct?
One more time?
The current setback in Lincoln County is 1320. I've heard that mentioned a number of times here tonight.
That's CAFO though,
That's
isn't
for
it?
CAFOs.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
I was wondering why we went from 1320 to 500.
Yep.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
that's what's been being referenced.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, any other public comment? Linda? You bet.
Linda Montgomery, Fairwood, South Dakota. I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer this. My question is to the point of, we are looking at 1052 in eminent domain. Not sure if we're going to get it passed. My hope is that it will be passed to do away with eminent domain. But I just feel this need for this ordinance that you and Doug have brought forward, and I think it's good, and with the changes that can make it in legal ease correct. How long are we looking at for a decision to be able to take it forward to the commissioners? I believe right now that time is of the essence. It's really scary to think that that bill is not going to pass. Scares me to death. And I just want to make sure that you as a commission, as the planning and zoning, can pull something together to protect the citizens of Lincoln County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Stever, Lennox, South Dakota. I do have one last question.
Yeah.
So if we don't have the 4-inch pipeline, can we have some criteria? We do know that Navigator had numbers for 1,855 feet, I believe, was for their 6 to 8-inch pipeline, if I'm not mistaken. Is there some sort of criteria that we can use that is based on what we believe Summit will use for their pipeline?
Okay.
We know they've got 24 and we know they've got 8-inch. And the plumes, as discussed earlier, dramatically different between the two, exponentially different. So if we could have some sort of criteria in there for some, not just 500 feet, for whatever. I mean, the whole point, I believe, for that to be associated with 4 inches was that it would scale according to the plume model. So some criteria of some sort would be I think, a good idea.
Okay, very
Thank you.
good, thank you. Anyone else?
Ernest Stroutmeyer, 28503, 474 Avenue, Worthing. I don't understand the pipeline size being taken out of there either and going with the 500 feet. The question that I have is, you say that planning and zoning can do something, but there's nothing in here that tells me that they are going to, like, try to make an example. A 24-inch pipe is what we might be talking about. And as we understand the science of it and so on, it's like 4 times greater than plus the pressure. What is it that tells the public that it will be something greater than 500 feet? I don't know how to understand that. And I guess that's what I see as the 500 foot setback. And then the other question that I follow that with is, as I understand it, a setback from a CAFO is 1320
Minimum.
minimum. Okay. So is there something from a CAFO that will kill people at 1320 or further, or 1,000 feet? Where the possibility of the CO2 pipeline does have that possibility if it ruptures. And that's why I question why we would have 500 feet for CO2, which is known to kill. They use it in Smithfield to kill the hogs. Why we would have 500 feet when it can be, it's a product that kills anything that it touches that's alive. And with the CAFOs being at 1320, and that seems to be a standard. That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can you speak? Yeah, come on up.
My name is Sandy Schultz, 47732 279th Street of Canton, South Dakota. So when, from my understanding, if you, like in Satortia, Mississippi, a couple years ago, they had a 24-inch pipe and it sheared because of water. They had a couple months of rain and that's why it sheared. It sheared in one place. So that, they said there were 3 men 1,500 feet away from that pipe. And he made one call and they were they were out, passed out in their car. And so, they were having difficulty because the oxygen is removed by this product, right? So how does an ignition vehicle work? How do you get your ambulance there? How do you get your fire people there? Somebody's talking about $50,000 towards our fire department. Well, if you can't get it there, it's worthless. How, is there a way we can protect ourselves from that type of thing? How? That's.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the floor to public comment and then the board will have some discussion. Thank you. Before I close the floor to public comment, thank you, Mrs. Vanatop, for reminding me. We did have a letter here from Michelle Jensen and Mike Hoffman as they had to leave earlier. They asked for me to read this, and they said, please support the ordinance 1.9.25V4. This ordinance is the best option presented that protects landowner eligibilities and land in Lincoln County and supports proper economic development. We have been working on this for 2 years. It's time. Thank you. Michelle Jensen, Mike Hoffman. So with that, we'll close.
Did you not have some questions for Drew?
What's that? We'll talk about that in our, when we close public comment, yep. Okay, so we'll close the floor to public comment and have some discussion. Does anybody want to start with questions, comments? I have a few. Mr. Jungling, you have a long list of notes. You want to start?
Go ahead, I'll let you start.
Okay.
I'm still contemplating.
Yeah, so, okay, first, in no particular order, the first question I have is, so the property line definition, I'm assuming that's all property lines and not just properties that have dwellings on them?
Well, let's go right to the ordinance. It's actually the property line that has a single-family dwelling, a church, a school, a nursing home, a hospital, a business, or a public facility, public park, or CAFO. So no, as Lynn pointed out, as the two first speakers, they mentioned building eligibilities. That would not be a setback in this current draft. So it's only those property lines that have a single-family dwelling, church, school, nursing home, hospital, business on it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, very good. That was my first question. Second comment then, just so we're comparing apples to apples, the CAFO setback is to the dwelling, not the property line. And so, a 500-foot setback to the property line is gonna be, could potentially be the same or even potentially greater than a 1,320-foot setback to the dwelling. Is the way I understand it. But that would go individually by each piece of property,
Well, I think,
depending on where the dwelling is on the property.
yeah, and I think factually though too is that in the rural, and you know this, in the rural area, the property line is the center of the road.
Yeah. So I guess that's my other question. So if it's a dwelling, so like the piece of property that I reside on is a quarter section of land, and the acreage isn't subdivided off of that, so my property line would be,
Center of the road.
yeah, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So typically in the rural area, property lines touch at the center of the road.
Yep.
But that's not your build line. Your build line is from the right-of-way line.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
But the property line would be the center of the road.
correct. In most cases, there are cases where it's been platted off, but not very often.
No, like, for example, Highway 11 that runs by me, that's been
Platted off.
platted off and the
Yeah.
state owns that. But,
Most township roads center of the road.
Correct.
Yeah.
yep, okay. So that I just wanted to get clarification on. So we have a lot of those where you have even more than 160 acres of land and have a dwelling on it. And that would insulate that dwelling with all the land around it then. To bring up to Mr. Miles's point then, how does that setback work if the neighbor signs a waiver and they no longer meet the 500-foot setback to the property line? Because then the setback isn't a setback. Maybe you should just stay up here, Toby, if we're gonna keep asking questions.
The wife says I need exercise.
Drew, bring his
so, yeah.
chair up.
I think it was a good comment. I reflect more that he was asking about, does a neighbor get notified if there is a waiver that'd be filed? And the answer is no. I mean, we file waivers almost every day on right to farm covenants and those types of things. The neighbors don't ever get notified on those. I don't know how we would do that. I don't.
But basically, just because the neighbor would, okay, if you got a quarter section of land next to me and I live on mine and you don't or whatever, and they want to run the pipeline through your quarter and you sign the waiver that they don't have to be 500 foot from your property line, I guess, because you have a dwelling there, they'd still have to honor the setback from my property line.
The 500 foot, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Correct. Yeah.
Yep. That makes sense. You would just be you'd just be wavering that they wouldn't have to meet the setback on your property.
You're only waiving your property line.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they can sneak over and get closer to mine just because they have all of yours to be waived out of, right?
If you had a house, no. If you don't have a house, yes.
Yep. And that gets tricky, yep. Okay, any other questions for Toby while we've got him up here?
I think one comment staff wanted to make is that, again, we didn't make any changes to Commissioner Otten and Putnam's ordinance because really we wanted the board to decide what that policy is. I think the discussion I've heard tonight is that I do think there needs to be some changes made. We want further discussion on the topics that I broached with you about the county commission, what my perception of the county commission ordinances is. I think based on the comments, and again, we've worked on this for 2 years. I mean, this hasn't been fast in any way, but I think we would propose that we would have a special meeting next month, potentially. But we need you guys to really iron out these detail things that need to be cleaned up so that we have a clean ordinance that the public would be able to see, that everybody would be able to see that. And I think that's only the way it should be done, so that we make sure everybody knows what they're voting on, and so that we send up something up to commissioners that's been fully vetted and the public's commented on that, but based on the discussion that I've heard tonight, so.
Okay. Very good. Now I remember my question for Mr. DeGroat. You don't have to come up here, you can sure answer from there. Yeah, the question from the crowd, if any ordinance is passed, will that be retroactive?
No.
So anything that's signed is,
They'd still have to meet the setbacks. It's not retroactive, I guess, from the standpoint of, that it's, because there's no setback right now. We don't
Yeah.
have any regulations in place. They'd have to meet the setbacks, though. It's just not retroactive. I mean, I guess I don't know how to really explain it, other than.
they'd have to meet the setback.
Yeah,
though.
they'd have to meet
Okay.
the setback. But
So-
it's not retroactive for any easement sign or anything like that.
Oh, yeah, okay, so,
Yeah,
makes
that
sense.
makes sense.
Okay, very good. So if we pass an ordinance, even people that signed up a long time ago, they still have to meet the setbacks. Okay, very good. That was my question.
They'd have a waiver.
Sure,
If they have a waiver, that doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And currently, we're still in the position that it's not a permitted use in Lincoln County. That's our stance, yep. Or basically, that's where we're at. Okay,
The term use is not in the zoning ordinance.
not in the zoning ordinance.
dioxide pipeline is not in the zoning.
Okay. And has that been asked, have they asked to supersede that by chance? You know?
Summit, you mean?
Yeah. No. Okay. Comments, questions? Seems like we're,
Mr. Chair.
yeah, go ahead, Mr. Jungling.
So one thing I do have concerns about, and I don't have an answer, I'm just going to have outside question, is just say ordinance number 5, where we're getting rid of the blue model, if I understand right. And we'll say 500 feet, just throw the number out there. And then if we feel it should be more, it can be more, we can make that distinction. You know, I'm going to open up a can of worms, but I'm not a blue model expert to determine what that distinction is. You know, as far as if it's, again, so many inch line as it should be so many feet away. I'm not the expert, and people that follow me on the board might not be either, and we're again talking 30 years down the road. Just, again, I don't have an answer, I'm just talking out loud as far as thinking through things.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Otten, yes.
The plume models did not go away. We just got rid of the one that was a duplicate. So if you go back into FF, yeah, it's there talking about the plume models. So we took out section 5 about the plume model guidelines, but it's actually still back in FF. Couple pages back.
Okay.
So we still want them to do the plume studies and give those to us unredacted. And that's why we took out the number 5, is because we didn't want Lincoln County having to pay for a plume study when we want that to come from Summit or whoever. Does that make sense?
So Commissioner Otten, we would have, say, if it's Summit, we would have them do the plume study and then give that to us?
That is correct, yes. Because they have to do that for PUC anyway.
My concern is I'm not sure what that study looks like. I mean, just still trying to learn, but would that study go from every house or every property line along the length?
Don't know.
You know?
Any more thoughts? I mean, I got a few if you want to think some more.
Yeah, no, please
Okay.
do.
Okay,
These are out loud thoughts now.
Yeah, no problem. Just a few more questions I had, and these are probably more for Commissioner Otten. It was referenced that in the conditional use process, that 500 feet is the setback would be the floor, but planning, what was referenced as the planning office, director, or commission would have a chance to increase the setback. What one is it, I guess? What is it defined as? Is it Toby's office? Would it be the commission here? It's your office currently?
Currently written, it'd be planning and zoning department.
So then that wouldn't have any chance at public hearing
Upon approval by the board of commissioners.
upon approval, then would the commissioners be able to change it?
Yeah,
Like a condition?
theoretically, yeah.
Like a condition? Okay, so basically both? Yep.
I'd say the department would give I'm breaking my rule, I gotta talk to the mic here. So that, as I interpret the ordinance, and again, that's always dangerous, that's why an ordinance should be clean, right, is that they would present the plume model to staff, and, again, whether or not that's public, I don't know, because that's becomes a document that's required by the feds and the South Dakota PUC. Then, as drafted, we would then consult with another person to do a plume model. Staff did talk to the authors, and we suggested that it'd be a better option maybe to require a third-party review of their plume model, as opposed to us doing a new plume model. And I spoke in terms of cost, because that's what I care about, because there's really no provision there for me to get my money back, which is the taxpayers' money. And my guess is, in order to do a plume model, if I hire somebody to do that, it's gonna be a lot of money to do that. So typically what we do is a third-party type review. We make them pay for that. They got to present it to us. Then we're able to look at and determine if it's logistical as that. We would take that into our guidance, give a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for a setback based on whatever analysis that would be. The danger in that, again, though, as we talked about, is that safety-based?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only concern that as legal came up earlier, they mentioned that too, is that, is that gonna be a safety type item that would potentially get us, we know we can't regulate safety, so that part of it. So, there's questions, concerns, but in terms of the ordinance, it's 3 and 4 that you guys have recommended anyways. It's just a little bit more detailed than what it is, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to, thanks for walking me through that, because I was just
Yep.
curious how that process would work, and there was concerns from some of the public that talked and how that process would work. So, just so we're right then, the 500 foot is just a floor, as Mr. Bogut recommended at the last meeting. That's just our standard floor. And then based on more information that your office would collect, we would actually get most probably a different setback.
Yeah, I mean,
Based on the findings.
yeah, I mean, and again, the plume model wasn't a completely public document during Navigator's application, but we were able to look at parts of it. I mean, it's not a consistent setback, right? It varies, topography, different soil conditions, those types of things. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge with some of that stuff, but I think it'll give you a more safety setback. So.
And just so but then you would take that information and probably farm that out to a third party, so it's not bogging you guys down.
Yeah, I mean, third party would just review it and give us
Review it.
give us a
Yeah.
recommendation. Yeah, they would say, well, the plume model's not good because it's not based on this type of a thing, or I view that the third party is more high level type thing.
Sure.
Because the concern that we had was, okay, so we do another plume model. Obviously, I mean, we've all built things, we all have worked with engineers, none of them ever agree on anything, right? And so that was a concern too, is that, well, what if our plume model is different than their plume model, but we didn't know all the plume model characteristics and requirements and that they're building too, and things like that. So third-party review is what we typically do that nowadays on different types of projects. There's always a third-party review.
Okay.
That's independent of them too, independent of us, independent of them. It's a third party, so.
Toby, sorry, as I had my notes. So a couple things I had in my notes that maybe were recommended as additions or could be additions is depth of cover, and that Mr. Vanatop had brought up, and that makes a lot of sense to me, as a farmer and as somebody that understands that could be a potential problem. Would you foresee any issue adding some terminology to protect that?
So my understanding is that that's part of the PHMSA policy recommendation, is that they look at cultivation depth of cover, which if they do that at the federal level, that preempts us. I mean, we're not going to have jurisdiction to do that, to my understanding of.
Could we look into it?
Yeah, we can look into that, but that's my limited understanding, what I see in that.
And am I right on that too, though? Even if it was in our ordinance, it wouldn't necessarily supersede the whole ordinance, just that portion of it?
Yes, potentially.
So we could have it in there and it isn't gonna mess everything else.
The other thing I would point out is that, and this is all jurisdictions, we don't permit a pipeline. So we're not gonna issue a building permit, we're not gonna see construction plans on the actual pipeline. For us to enforce it, that's gonna be a challenge.
Sure.
Without having an actual permit, in place, because we'll have nothing to say, well, you shouldn't do that, well, your zoning says that, well, that's gonna have to be approved conditionally, so. There's gonna be some limitations in my mind on that part of it. But I do, from what I can see reading into PHMSA's, what they're proposing for new regulations, that is a high concern of theirs, is that cultivation level.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good. That's good that they're looking at that, so.
No, that could be a mess.
Yeah, yep.
Big time. And then, the other thing I had wrote down here is, just a thought, is, like an emergency management plan. I mean, is that, something that can be added in there, that needs to be provided?
So, we're in contact, the department's in contact with our emergency management official in the county and the other departments. The pipeline is meeting with those individuals. I haven't attended those meetings. I don't know what it is. I would prefer that we would do what we typically do with townships now. What we do with emergency management is we'd put a condition there that they have to, provide some training and support to that, and then
Well,
that we
that's what I'm
regulate
wondering.
it.
Yeah, can we
Yeah.
add that?
As a condition on approval, would probably be a better way to do that.
Okay.
Because some departments might want a little bit more direction. We don't know where they're at with their contributions and all that stuff. It'd be better for us to not anticipate what that is, but to actually regulate it like we do with a conditional use permit when it gets to that point.
Well, that makes sense, but I mean, we can easily, that could be just
Standard condition.
standard
Yeah,
conditions.
Standard condition, yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
They all, I know it's been on Facebook that the T Fire Department had a training session from Summit, and it was not open to the public, but they said that you could find the minutes on the T Fire Department website, a Facebook page about what happened, and it was not open to the public, but they are doing training. Summit is, with the fire departments.
Good.
I guess to better answer that, Mr. Chair, I think we would want to be specific with the departments and with their needs. And I think for us we could put some cookie cutter language in there now, but that's not going to be suffice to what we're going to need if this happens.
Yeah, I think it should be
So.
this fire department, this emergency management. Yeah, I mean, it has to go right down the list, just like, yeah.
Yep, so.
Might be a lot of conditions, but I think that's probably the way to cover it.
Should be, yep.
And they could be added as well, right? So like if there's concerns, and we missed it, we can always add them.
Well, on the conditional use permit, we can always bring it up on a review too. We've done that, we periodically do that,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, if they don't follow through with the condition, right? Yeah, good point. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Brown before he sits down for the?
I wanted him to get like 6 steps back.
It's fun to catch.
Didn't wear my watch today,
Going
so I don't know
back,
how
yeah.
many steps I got, yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, this setback issue, I struggle with, one of our roles, future land use, and understanding the public's comments regarding, if I have, for example, 8 building permits, that I have currently no plans for, but they are mine, right, that I could potentially use for what I want, or the mindset that it potentially limits the future use of. Even in how it's currently written, single-family dwelling and all those things, even by platting then, that does not, if we were to plat the building permits that were currently available and say we picked along the roadway every 500 feet and put a plat, that, since there is no single-family dwelling currently there, the way that it's currently written, that would not prohibit anything then, right? That's-
Correct. Yeah, it's just like CAFOs, the structure has to be there for the setback, yeah.
And I think, thanks, Toby. And I think, some of my concern is, ensuring that for future land use, we are able to protect that for the people that currently own their properties and those building permits. And I think it's critical for us to identify how we do that too. So it's, as written, I don't think that's, currently the way.
No.
So what language I'm sorry, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
What language could we put in this to cover Mr. Green's concerns about not being platted, but wanting to protect the landowner in the future? Is there a way to do that?
For just building eligibilities?
Correct. If there's no building on there, but we want to protect that landowner in the future when some of them had come up and they want their kids to come back or whatever, and all of a sudden they can't build anything for their kids or grandkids because they got a pipeline running through it, when we need to protect that landowner's property.
Could it not then be 500 feet from the property line versus structures, dwellings, all that's, I don't.
I think that that'd be great if you could do that, but the problem with that would be it would be too restrictive. There would be no route if we just made it from every property line, right? Then there wouldn't be a route unless
everybody's on waivers, right? Like
Unless everybody waivers, correct, yep. Or agrees. Yeah, I guess you could, yeah.
Right, like that's currently the
Yep. Just make it
process.
every property line.
Right.
Well,
That would be how you'd have to do it, yeah.
we've had the discussion about building eligibilities for a long time, and the challenge is with building eligibilities, they can move too. So I mean, it's, how would we ever, but I mean, logistically, yeah, I mean, you would just do the property line for anything, yeah.
Well, and not only housing eligibilities, but and one of the things that we visited about a long time ago, and it's kind of hasn't been brought up since, is the fact that, on your farm liability policy, there's an exemption that if there was a rupture and all your cattle died or all your pigs died, they aren't covered by your insurance. And so, you can look at that as safety. I look at that as a major economic impact. And so I could have a cattle facility with I guess it does say, does it say CAFOs as well?
Does say CAFOs.
Yeah, for setbacks.
feeding operation.
But, when we look at those potentials as well, you look at the future economic impact of maybe I have the setback to build a hog building or a cattle feed lot, and, I now all of a sudden can't build the thing because it's right there.
But, this,
I struggle with that too.
And we've had this dialogue quite a bit, is that then you get into the whole topic about reverse setbacks too.
Correct.
That, I mean, there's nothing to prevent us from issuing a building permit for somebody to stick it right over, next to the easement. After this is built, if it's built, I'll go that angle and stuff like that. I mean, that's, I've always, I've had that argument with everybody about the CAFOs is, we're restricted, but we'll let somebody build right into it. Well, we're restricting it because we say it's a nuisance and it's a harm, that we don't want you there, but then we'll allow somebody to put a house in right after we put a CAFO in, and it happens every day. I mean, we're putting houses in the setbacks all the time, so, yeah. This is complicated, right? I mean, but we do want you guys to spend some time just kind of cleaning up what you want this. And it appears that our ordinance number 5 is the preferred route. It's just you have to kind of clean it up a little bit. And I would encourage you to think about some of those things that I think the Board of Commissioners requested to put it in there. And, again, we're regulating. We're creating a law for this process, and it's never an easy process. And at the end of the day, it comes down to policy making, which is never perfect. But,
I'm trying to think that through, Toby. Sorry, I'm Norwegian, it takes me a little bit to catch up, but, if we just made it from all the property lines, that wouldn't necessarily slam the door on a route. Because you could still get a route as long as you're
500 feet off the property line.
Yeah. And the property person that they agree that they can go across your property, and they stay 500 foot away from yours, like that wouldn't completely eliminate the route, I don't think. Might be a little harder, but.
I struggle with it not being basic economics, right? What's it
Right.
gonna take to get through there? Like that's,
Yeah. And I mean, we can talk about dwellings all we want, but I mean, I agree with those, but as a livestock producer, there could be some huge economic impact to the current and future livestock production in the county, if they aren't protected as well.
But then why wouldn't they just go get 500-foot easements across the whole county?
As far as?
That's how they would circumvent it. They would just get a 500-foot easement. Now they're only doing like 50-foot easements.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And
Yeah, yeah.
that's more of a detriment though, because
Yeah.
if the easement says they can do whatever they
Make
want
the
there.
easement bigger.
Yeah, but you're potentially opening up landowners in the county to hurt their property more than the 50-foot easement.
Yeah, but not really, because that really wouldn't gain them anything if you're already, because the person that you're staying away from isn't gonna give them the easement.
But they could,
So I mean,
put-
it wouldn't gain them anything to have a 500-foot easement versus a 50, if the setback's from the center of the pipeline.
but they could put a pipeline in a 50-foot corridor.
Mhm.
But then they got another 450 feet that they could sell somebody to put a substation, to put a windmill, to put a whatever they want to put there, right? That's the detriment. You're potentially passing a policy that's going to hurt the landowners more than it would benefit them. That's why policy
I
is
just
hard.
I don't understand that, I guess.
Yep. Well, I was just saying if their workaround would be they just do a 500-foot easement through the county.
But that really wouldn't work it around. I mean, that wouldn't be any easier than having a 51, would it? Explain it to me, because I don't understand. Or explain it to us. I mean, if you gotta meet the setback from the center of the pipeline, why would you wanna try to get a bigger easement? Now, with eminent domain, that's a completely, now we're talking maybe a different deal.
Yeah, you just push them, we haven't really studied what the easements are or what they've secured in the county. My guess is they're putting them closer to the roadway, as close as they can. That's typically where they build them. Now, if you're doing that, you're pushing them further out into the land. It's like Mr. Hurley said, he'll move it further from him, but they move it closer to somebody else. That's what we're talking about, a pipeline. It's going closer to somebody and away further from somebody. And then, one thing that I think I forgot to mention is that, and this came up early in the conversation, is if they have eminent domain and you have a setback of a property line, they could take the entire property because of the setback.
Meet the setback.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we gotta be careful.
That's why I've made the comment many times, I'm not an expert on setbacks, huh? It's just the deeper you get down the hole, it just, it's tough. And it's probably why nobody's come up with a number that we can agree on.
Well, I think that's why nobody has a setback on a pipeline that can do eminent domain. Because they would take the property.
Mm-hmm.
And they would take it not because of federal requirements, but because of the county requirements, if they weren't preempted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we look at these things as staff, we don't take sides for or against this. We look at it from a regulatory standpoint, because we're the ones at the end of the day, whatever your policy is, we have to enforce this. And boy, I tell you what, that would be we lived through the eminent domain that the county was attempting to do, and that was not an easy process. But I can't imagine somebody losing their house because we have a setback, And that's the danger in what it is. And now currently today, as we sit, they do not have eminent domain, but if they did,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
they would just take the setback.
Mhm.
If that comes around, we could always, it's not that easy, but we could change the ordinance to
Takes
reflect those
takes
others.
3 months. Yeah.
So Toby, am I reading this correctly? As I look through it, the way it's currently written, number 5, I'll specify that because we had separate ordinance for light industrial and ag before. So the way it's currently written right now is, so it's allowing conditional uses on ag for the line sections. So anything else would be non-permissible then, right? And then for the light industrial, it's allowing conditional use for a carbon dioxide production facility, which would be the above ground, right?
So, again, terminology, but so the I-1 would be the production facility. And I should mention, we talked about that as staff too, is that if we had nothing today, we would treat that as an I-1 rezone anyways, right? The production type facility. That's how it would work. It's a manufacturing type use. So this ordinance requires that, and then this ordinance requires that the pipeline system, so when you go back to the pipeline system, that includes the valves and everything that would be there.
So the I-1 light industrial, we're specifically talking about like the ethanol plant.
Their facility that's converting it and then piping it out, the capturing it.
So that's not necessarily these however many 6 or 8 items across the county that are above ground facilities.
Correct, that's not the valves.
That would fall under the A1 agricultural.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing something that, the light industrial piece, as compared to our new comprehensive plan, I was making sure there wasn't anything that was not jiving, and so I appreciate that clarification,
Well,
thank you.
to clarify, I take that back. What I read GG to mean is that carbon dioxide pipeline system accepting the line section, so that would be the valves and everything, so that is that part there. But it accepts the line section, so the line section is only allowed in the A1, which should be the actual pipe, underground pipe. So the only challenge that I see as we're talking and I'm looking at this now is, so we rezone the valve, but the ground underneath it, you're rezoning that too, so you're not allowing the line section there, so it should probably say including the line section there. All right, way in the weeds there, and I'll try that again one more time. So the valve's above ground.
Right.
So we rezone that. Okay, well, you rezone the ground, right?
And what are we rezoning that to?
I-1.
Which then gets back to my question of spot zoning, like all of a sudden now, we're allowing for exceptions to our comprehensive plan to spot zone for this specific use, right? Which, you know, I know we've sold, which I agree with, this comprehensive plan is great, but now, you know, we're almost introducing ordinances that are going to tell us that we're gonna step away from what we tried to simplify to begin with, but.
Yeah, if it was, as you pointed out, staff would recommend denial because it'd be a spot zone.
Right. And that's, and I struggle with that going into something like this because I think we as a commission would recommend denial because it's spot zoning, right? So, I don't know. I struggle with that.
So knowing that, it doesn't make much sense to write it in the ordinance that way, does it?
Right.
Yeah.
When it seems that it is in contrast to the comprehensive plan that we just passed.
And I see your point, Toby. I think what you were trying to explain was, since the pipe is only, the underground deal is only, would only be applicable in A1, since the whole structure of the soil would be, you know, however far down would be, then that section of the underground pipe would be out of, would be not in the right.
We wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
Right.
So you'd have a.
So they couldn't have the pipe underneath the valve.
Couldn't have a pipe under the valve, yeah.
I do agree with Commissioner Green, and you know, at some point, it's like, yeah, well, then what kind of precedence does that set? And then it's the next thing that comes along and says, well, yeah, but, we need to have all these little commercial zones throughout A1, and we're right back to where we were at.
Right, and that's where I struggle, right? So whether, you know, this is going through rural Lincoln County, right, which is A1. So now we're just saying off the get-go that we're just gonna rezone it to I-1 light industrial. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you know, we're talking about A1 agriculture, generally speaking, I think. So now, I don't know if this is just because we're using terminology to create, I don't know. I just don't know why this isn't just either all in A1 agriculture, or if we're adding the terminology, should the full terminology just be added to both A1 agriculture and I-1 light industrial? Because the way it currently sits, we're just mute on carbon dioxide pipelines. So we're trying to add carbon dioxide pipelines into the ordinances. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But if that's where if that's the zoning that they should have to be permitted, maybe they aren't allowed maybe they're not allowed in the ag district, and I know
But they have
that
to
being
be-
awful hard,
But they have to be 2 miles from municipality, which is where the I-1 light
Where they
industrial
gotta be,
is,
yeah.
right? So it's,
Mhm.
You know, we do spot zoning for a cable TV antenna or,
we don't though, we do CUPs.
We don't rezone them.
No, they're
We do.
A1 agricultural that has a continued use permit.
Yep.
Which is why I don't know why we would do A1
Fiberglass,
agriculture and just
just
not have a
CUPs.
conditional use permit for these above line or above ground facilities, but that's where I struggle.
Could we split the above-ground structures and the below-ground structures into two different things? Commissioner Green just brought up a good point. The above-ground structures, if they could be handled separately on their own conditional use permit, with their own standards, like we talked about earlier, with probably a larger setback, out of sight, out of mind. Maybe that would be, what do you think about that, Commissioner Otten? Would you be okay with that?
What I'd like to propose is all of these things that have come together, that I think the consensus with the public and maybe here is that we pass 5 as a draft and then get together with a small group, like with legal and some of the commissioners here, and work together to make this a clean ordinance, if that is something that you'd all work with. Because there's so many things now that have come forward that need to be addressed in whatever ordinance that we're using. But I think 5 is where we could start with and then just change that and make it clean. And address all of the issues that we're just talking about. That's my suggestion.
What was the reason we were going to make that light industrial, the above ground?
I think that originally came from the commission, didn't it, through Commissioner Landine? That she wanted the above-ground structure?
yeah, and that was kind of option number 4 also.
Right.
The original idea and the original way it was written was the whole route of the pipeline would get rezoned. Because that's the only place, it's the only place that, the only zoning district that it's currently fits. And so that's where the thought came from originally. And then, Commissioner Landine, then there was some dialogue between, well, is it the whole route of the pipeline or is it just the above-ground structures? And that was a question. And so now, that's where we're at, that's the question. And I think there's probably a better way to handle it without us, and have the exact same result, in my opinion, without us having to go back and to Commissioner Green's point, and have to continue to go back against what we recommend in the comprehensive plan and spot zone light industrial.
And potentially, you guys talked about, which I think is a good discussion, is what if parts of it gets preempted, but parts of it don't? I don't believe that the above-ground structures would get preempted. I mean, we regulate all those currently.
Yep.
It gives you a little bit of option there. As something I would say is, it takes us time to schedule these public hearings. I think I'd be willing we have a special meeting next month, but I gotta have a notice published within 10 days. I mean, so there's not a lot of time to really kind of retro it. I think let's just beat it out tonight and see where you guys want to go with it. And then gives opportunity to the public to kind of see where they're not. And it sounds like you're close. I mean, I hear a lot of things that are realistically pretty close that need to be there. And, the rest of it's just all kind of falls into place. It's just, again, it gets back to, I know everybody hates the 4 ordinances, but those were just frameworks that we were trying to figure out, what do you guys want to do, Like, do you want to treat it this way or that way? And we get caught up in the setback and, look, we've only got 3 things in the county that require a setback, minus typical building sections and stuff like that. The majority of things we do are by conditional use, and we regulate those heavily. I mean, they're public hearings, you guys do them every month, So I think it's legitimate, and the rezone is, all the things that I think you guys talked about, proud of you. I mean, that's stuff that we should be talking about is like, oh, how's this gonna work? And, and good, the comp plan, yeah, and staff would recommend an out of a spot zone. It would just, so does that get preempted because we're not allowing it to be built in the county, so.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Can we, all the changes that we're looking to do for this ordinance, does this have to be done in public, or can we do a small meeting on the side to present that at the next meeting, is my question.
Yeah, I think the board can do what they want to do. I think as staff, we like it to be public, because then everybody's going to know there's a written record of why we did what we did, and that part of it. But it's not going to be perfect. You're still going to have the public is going to agree or disagree with what your changes are and go from there, but,
But how do we make the changes without us meeting before the next public meeting, is my question.
Hammer it out right
Talk
now.
about it right now.
Okay,
Just hammer it out.
all
And I
right.
think that's what Toby's recommending.
Okay.
And and I agree, Toby. I think we just keep going down and down, we at some point, we gotta clean this up, get with the program and get going here. And it already sounds like no matter what we do tonight, we got some cleanup work to do, and we're gonna be talking about this again next month, right? I think we're all in agreeance on that. So, I guess before I finish my thought, Commissioner Jungling had something he wanted to say, and then I'll finish my thought.
Well, I've just been keeping a list of, I think, 5 basic items we keep going through around, so I thought maybe we go through them one by one and say, let's give staff a direction,
Okay.
yes, no, and then like Toby suggested, we put together that based on our direction, and then we have a special meeting to iron out any other details once we actually can see it and read it physically in front of us.
And that draft would then be available for the public in that
Public to see.
form prior to that meeting, which I think would help
Yep.
address some of the concerns.
Yeah, then we have a special meeting, we put it all together, read it, make any additional changes, then that next draft would go for public input.
To the commission. We would vote on it then, and then the commission would have public comment on it at their scheduled meeting, and then that would go.
So I think, I'm just gonna clarify with you, Toby and Drew. You guys, we should be able to give you what you need tonight to bring us a clean ordinance, a clean finished ordinance by next month.
Yeah, I think Drew will step up and make sure we're clarified with you, but what I want to get to is we would publish another public hearing for a special meeting next month. And then you guys would vote on it, take public comment, and give a recommendation.
Yeah.
You could make changes again, but
But these initial changes and cleanups, especially what like Drew was bringing up, they would be done.
yeah, the farm stuff is already what he talked about. The policy is what,
Right.
I don't mean
We
to
can
keep
give that
saying
policy
this as
guidance.
you guys
Yeah, we
are
can knock
telling
that
us
out.
what
We
you
can knock
want.
that
Yeah.
out. I think all of us have our own idea, or have some ideas and quite possibly could be in agreement on it, so.
Now let's take notes, so you guys talk, and
Sure.
we'll take notes.
So the first thing I want to talk about, that I want to bring up, and I think is because if we work this out first, if we don't, if it stays how it is, then we have a whole nother things we need to talk about. And that's this above-ground structure business. I would 100% be in favor. I like the idea of maybe taking that out of this ordinance and making it in its own conditional use process with it, and treat it like a CAFO with let's put 1,320 foot setback on it. That's our standard, in the county for other things, and so I don't know why it should be less than that. and maybe potentially more. But I do like that, we could have a whole nother discussion then through that process above the above-ground things. And I believe that not only the planning commission, but the county commission has a lot more teeth or things they can do with above-ground structures than we can below-ground pipelines. And so I guess, just me personally, that's what I would support, is to take that out and put that off on its own conditional use process. That should be possible, yep.
So to clarify then, would that be included valves or anything above ground, or just the facility? You're talking valves, everything above ground? Okay.
All above-ground structures, yep.
And I can support that too. I just make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, I think so.
I could support that too.
Okay,
I
anybody
could,
else?
yes.
So let's start with that, and then that cleans up our whole zoning issue with the ordinance. I think that opens up kind of an interesting, that'll make that interesting. From there then, was there anything else in the policy part of it, you guys, did anybody else have anything else that they would like to see either changed, added, removed?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Jungling.
I would like to add the talk about training for the local fire departments.
Okay.
So when they come for a permit or whatever that would end up being, to list the fire department that is in that area that they pass through.
Yep.
So that way it's just noted.
And emergency management services
Yep.
and so forth. Yep.
So
So
whatever
that would be added in the conditions.
yeah, whatever that is, they must provide training and support.
Okay. And then, one of the other things I would like to see, and I don't know why it never hit me before, but the whole depth of cover deal. I mean, I realize that that's maybe a FEMA thing, but, I think we give it a whirl if it isn't gonna preempt our whole ordinance, and maybe that portion gets kicked out, but I think that is something that we should have we should have,
How would that impact knowing, like, there's already one township out there that
Yep.
has 7 foot, right? If
Yep.
we were to say 6, I assume preempt that, I suppose.
yeah, or just leave it at 7 too, we could, I guess. Mhm.
I like that too.
Then their ordinance is still good.
Mhm.
So I think add that, Mr. Brown, some verbiage to that.
And Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
what about a fee?
yeah, that'd be the other thing we need to really discuss.
That was next too.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think we have to add a fee. Or I shouldn't say we have to, be my opinion that we should. It's gonna cost a lot of money to administer the projects. It costs a lot in just the planning office.
Do we know how many feet of pipeline will go through Lincoln County?
Great question.
We don't,
That could change.
depending on the routing, right, but,
And I think it should be an annual fee.
I do too.
I don't think it should be a one-time fee. I think it should be an annual fee.
Yeah.
Annual fee based on footage and additional costs for any studies that need to be done to plume models or whatever ends up being, where we have to outsource or use staff time.
so generally speaking, so it's obvious, $52,000 about for every 10 miles of pipe, right, if that's at $1 a foot. So, generally speaking then from.
You're 30 miles.
That's initially what I put in there is 30 miles, so you're talking $150,000 a year.
150 to 200,000.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
That's at $1, right?
that's at $1.
So would it be better just to set it as a constant fee rather than a per linear foot, just
Oh,
set it as
this is
a
this much.
$150,000 or a $200,000 a year fee?
Be clean. The nice thing about the footage, if then we'd have something that it's based off of, you know?
Well, yeah.
If it could become more feet
Yep.
or less. And then if, say, the next pipeline that comes in has twice as much feet, and we just have this one set fee, you know, whereas if we assign it so much per linear foot.
You know, 30 miles is $150,000 in fees to be able to support all of the additional work that goes into it.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
I don't know if that's enough, but, yeah.
Well, then you
Well,
could make
I don't know
it,
if we need to set a dollar amount tonight, if we
Oh.
write it in there, maybe we just set a blank and
What do you think, Toby? Is it gonna be better if we have the dollar amount? Yep.
well, then we have to talk about also the,
it's 2 FTE, right, about?
was
It's
that,
two- So 150,000 or at $1 a foot, that ends up being about 2 FTE worth of people to be able to support it per year, right? If you want to turn dollar amount into people.
well, then let's bump it up to more than $1 a
I agree with
foot.
that.
I mean, I think $1 a foot is pretty cheap.
I do
really.
too.
I think we should make it more in the $5 or $10 even a foot. At least a 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we
I think
could start.
We talked about back here that maybe based on what that Senate Bill 2 was.
Which was?
I'm sorry.
That,
$1.
was that
just
$1?
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
It was
you
$1.
know, after the first year though, I mean, staff's time should be.
A lot less
It's going to be
limited.
just in the ground. so-
Good point, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So otherwise
Right.
that then is good for the county is,
Should we go with $2? I don't know. I
So
see
the reason
stats-
we couldn't do 5 was because of why?
Oh, we probably could.
Senate Bill 201 was $1.
And that was
I
a
don't
great,
care.
that was kind of.
It died.
Yeah, it did die.
There's a reason they set that way.
I don't think it's enough.
I don't have a problem with 5. if we go with-
Well, I
We'd
still
have to
think it
set
has to
out
be an annual
yearly
fee.
inflation.
Yes.
I don't think it can be a one-time fee. I still think it has to be an annual fee.
Agreed.
I agree. You know, when you start to get over that, I think you start to get in the conversation of it being too restrictive. Now, I don't know how much these companies make, I don't know, you know, but does it become too restrictive at that point to be feasible? I would hate our fee structure to be the reason why, you know, I don't know.
well, it's something we can adopt at next meeting, so we can just, let's go.
Something to think over?
Split the difference, let's do $250 a foot for now,
We could add the fee structure at next
and
meeting.
then just change it. We could change.
Like
it.
somebody's saying here where there's the double X's, means we need to decide
I
that
think,
structure.
I think we're all in agreement, so we're gonna add a fee structure.
And it'd be annual.
Okay, so Toby, can you put that in the verbiage?
As a dollar, you guys can change.
Yeah, and then we'll draft it as $1 and we'll talk about changing it next month.
Yes.
Okay,
$1 and annual, I think is.
Yes,
and
it has to
annually,
be
Yes.
annual.
okay.
And escalation every year also, because in 30 years, $1.
$1 isn't gonna be much, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so rezone setbacks. We got our 4. Okay, the other thing then would be is, the only other thing we talked about kind of at length was setbacks from property lines. Do we leave it as setbacks from property lines with dwellings, with stuff on it? Or do we go to all property lines? I guess that'd be the only other big change that I can see.
I like your all property lines.
Yeah,
I just think we need to protect, you know, Lincoln
Everybody.
County's future growth, right? And that's, the way it's currently written, I don't believe that it meets that threshold. Yeah, that's my concern as a planning and zoning commission, is the future growth,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Did you catch that, Toby? Let's start.
Just 500 foot from a property line.
From the property line. Yep.
Okay, very good. Any other suggestions?
Check my notes, but I think that covered all the basic items I had.
Commissioner Otten, do you catch anything that we missed?
No, I'm just kind of looking through my notes too. I think that the conversation tonight has been absolutely spot on and spearheaded to where we need to go in the future, because, I mean, you guys have just done an incredible amount of work to start with. So I commend you for that, and I commend all of you that were on Commissioner Gibbons' task force as well, because that brought us to here, and I think this is the direction that we need to keep going.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Sweeter?
I appreciate the conversation. It's a learning tool. It's good conversation.
Very good.
And, Mr. Chair, we were going to remove the definitions.
Oh, that's what
Well, and I think that
Well-
falls under Toby's,
Wasn't that?
your guys' cleanup work, doesn't it?
Wasn't it?
Well, we have to let them know.
Oh. Well, yeah.
You know, we could just get rid of the 90%, and then it just, it's carbon.
That's my
But
struggle,
I'm
right?
open
When we just start to identify things that could potentially be future manipulated to create gray area, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
everyone loves to work in the gray area. I don't know. I would just propose removing them
Okay.
I agree.
I would propose that also.
and just discuss it as carbon pipeline.
Yep.
And then that gives us the flexibility to work through what that
Decide
is.
what carbon,
Right?
what carbon, yeah. Okay,
So the answer was get rid of all definitions?
Yes.
Okay. My only concern is, and I'm not going against it, is just like when we talk about garden centers and stuff like that, that's not defined, and that's kind of, well, the thorns in our side of the county.
And so the cultivation level, did we change that to 7 feet to make that? Okay.
yep. Depth of cover, yep. Okay, last one, Commissioner Green is,
I think I'm good.
we good?
Excited for next month. I feel a tickle in my throat, but I'll be
We're
here.
maybe getting to the end.
Good.
Well, great. Any questions from staff on,
Good job, Betty. You've done a really good job.
Toby? Any questions from you guys on what we decided?
So the last thing, Mr. Chair, is if you want to have a special meeting with publication requirements, we could meet the week before our typical meeting. Would be the earliest we could do it.
I think that'd be a good idea to have a special meeting. We just will do as fast as possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's
All
get
right.
it,
So will you
let's get it done.
facilitate that? Yep. Do what you have to do?
Yep, just put it on your calendars, because we like to call you at the last minute to make sure you're coming.
What day will
Yeah,
that be?
what's the date? Do you have that?
March.
Oh, we stumped him. Look at that.
Third Monday. So it'd be March 10th?
Anybody know what it is?
So our normal meeting would be March
Yes.
17th, so
Yeah,
it'd be March 10th.
March 10th, yeah.
Granddaughter's.
Can it be any sooner than that?
No, because we have to publish
Okay.
and to get in the legal newspaper.
17th of St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, and the
it'd be March
17th is
10th?
also, planning, or is also, Board of Equalizations for the townships.
Right.
What?
Board of-
Well, we'll just move our business items to that meeting, so we won't meet on the 17th. We'll call it a special meeting.
Yeah, because the 17th will be the
Yeah.
Board of Equalization.
Yeah, we'll just move our other items to that meeting, so. Okay,
March
sense.
10th. Okay, very good.
you're almost done. You got one more item, so.
So we remove March 17th. Is that what you're saying?
I'll formally do that. We'll have to go through a process. I'll have to verify all that stuff, so, yeah.
I don't know who else that involves. I mean, that was, I won't be able to make it, but,
Yeah, that is yeah.
yeah, that's our Board of Equalization.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys, and I hope you know the staff, we were just throwing out some ideas too for policy because we need to move somewhere with this, so it's.
I think we're close.
It's good, yeah.
I think we are.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Toby. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the election of officers.
Yep, so per the planning commission bylaws, the second regular meeting of the month, the board elects amongst their members a chair, a vice chair, and then the alternates. The alternates would continue to be Monty DeRusso.
Thanks,
and Colin
guys,
Edsman.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So that's the two, we propose to keep those. And how the alternates work is when you serve your 2 terms, then we bump you to an alternate. And so we've had a little bit of turnover. We haven't had like a standard person. So Monty DeRusso's actually been on the Planning Commission for a long time.
Yeah.
So he's fulfilled his purpose. Yeah. So, but I know he loves serving, doing all that stuff. So again, we just need discussions. As I mentioned before, as I visited with most of you about kind of, I only received real interest stated interest from Commissioner Otten. And her intent purpose would be, as the chair, would be to not vote unless there's a tie or something like that. And she really, as she's new to the board, she really wants to just facilitate the meeting and not be involved in your decision-making process and stuff like that. But I won't speak for her. I'll let her do that part of it. But each of you just need to make a recommendation. We do one at a time for a chair and then motion for that, so.
Yep. Okay, very good. Okay, so we're to the nomination part. Do we have anyone who will make a nomination for the chairperson? I'm going to nominate Commissioner Jungling.
I'd second that.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Do we have any more nominations?
I would nominate Commissioner Otten.
Okay. We have a second. Okay, see none, then we just have the one, nomination and a second that we'll vote on, I guess. So start with Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeter,
Yes.
Commissioner Otten,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott is also a yes, so congratulations, Mr. Green.
Thank you, everybody.
Or Mr. Jungling. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, everybody. I really, I do everything I can to keep your trust. Thank you.
Yep. I've served with Jerry ever since I started, and he's done a really good job, and there was kind of you were rocking along as chairman, and you got, redistricted?
Redistricted.
Yeah, basically, so, welcome back. Okay, so for the vice chair, can I get a nomination for the vice chair?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a nomination of Commissioner Scott to be the vice chair. I think you've done an outstanding job as the chair, and I just think, kind of the natural progression would be that if the chair can't make it, you step in as the chair. You have that experience, so I would love to nominate you for that, sir.
I will second.
Okay. All right, very good, thank you. Commissioner, we'll just vote then. Commissioner Jungling?
No, I agree with that. Are you calling roll?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't need to say anything about it.
I didn't know if we were looking for a nomination.
No, well, I guess, yeah. That would be the thing. Is there anybody else? Any other? No? Okay, then we'll call the roll.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Otten?
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeter?
Yes.
Commissioner Green?
Yes.
All right, thank you, guys. Yeah, well, good. Yeah, and I appreciate it. As most of you know, I got kind of handed this chairman thing when our past one resigned, and so it wasn't anything that I was ever really prepared for or necessarily wanted to do, but I've done it, and I appreciate all your guys' support, and thanks for hanging with me, and making sure that I call the meeting minutes, so appreciate it, and with that, I believe we can ask for a motion to adjourn.
Do we need to do something with so we've done the first two, do we need to do anything with the alternates to keep them on it? I believe.
We just need to move to approve the alternate list?
Colin instead and Monty DeRusso.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we get a motion to approve Colin and Monty as the alternates?
I'll make that motion, Jungling.
Second, Green.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? All right, very good. So they stay. Now can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Green.
Second, Sweeter.
Okay, it's been moved properly seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, guys.